You ever have one of those mornings where you wake up and realize reality is just vibing differently? Like the world pressed shuffle overnight? That was me today. I opened my window to the usual concrete jungle. Except it's not usual because the begonias in my neighbor's window box shout, "Morning, champ," like we're old college buddies. The begonias. My first thought? Somebody spiked my midnight slice. But then I remember, I didn't even eat pizza last night, which frankly is suspicious in itself. "Morning," I say back, cautiously, because I'm not about to let a flower get the conversational upper hand. The daisies nod sagely, as if to say he's catching on. Great. My plants don't talk, by the way. They're too cool for that. My potos gave me a look last year that said, "Water me or perish," and I respected the boundary. But these window box flowers? Chatty as a brunch crowd at a bottomless mimosa spot. Anyway, I chalk it up to either weird dreams or an elaborate citywide art installation. This is New York, after all, and head out for coffee. That's when it really hits me. Everyone's in on the bit. Some guy in a sharp suit passes me on the sidewalk, and instead of the usual New York scowl, he tips an imaginary hat. I don't know how I know it's imaginary. It just is, but I find myself nodding back. No words, just this unspoken exchange of, "Good morning, my telepathic comrade." It's oddly polite, in a way that makes me suspicious. New Yorkers aren't polite. We're efficient. Politeness wastes seconds you could spend not missing your train. At the corner, the hot dog vendor I see every Tuesday greets me with, "Try the pretzels today." They're feeling optimistic. And listen, I didn't ask how or why the pretzels have emotions, but I bought one. I had to. It's a little dry, if I'm being honest, but there's a note of saltiness that feels cheerful. I can't explain it. It's like the pretzel's rooting for me. I take another bite and hear it whisper, or maybe I imagine it. "You've got this, buddy." The subway is its own brand of delightful chaos. Usually, the train's packed with people pretending the others don't exist. But today, it's like everyone's been rehearsing for an improv show. A woman with a briefcase locks eyes with a guy in a Mets cap, and suddenly, they're in a silent conversation. I can't hear a word, but I feel the drama. Longing, betrayal, reconciliation. 2 stops later, they nod in unison and go their separate ways, like a perfectly choreographed breakup. Meanwhile, a busker on the platform isn't playing a guitar. He's just holding it and thinking the music. And we're all hearing it. It's hauntingly beautiful, like the soundtrack to a movie where the protagonist finally realizes they're in love. By the time I reach my first review spot of the day, a hole-in-the-wall falafel joint in Astoria, I'm fully leaning into the weirdness. The owner greets me like we've been lifelong rivals. "Back again, I see," he says, hands on his hips, as if I've been sneaking in here nightly to critique his tahini. "You know the hummus doesn't need you, right? It's self-sufficient." "Yeah, well, I'm here for the falafel," I shoot back, playing along. He smirks like he's won some invisible battle and hands me a plate. It's perfect, of course, crispy on the outside, fluffy on the inside. But the falafel also seems self-aware, like it knows it's good but doesn't want to brag. I leave a generous tip, because what else do you do when your lunch exudes quiet confidence? The rest of the day is a blur of delightful absurdity. A pigeon on a park bench nods at me like, "Yeah, we see each other." A street performer is juggling invisible flaming torches, and the crowd reacts as if they're really there. Someone even yells, "Don't burn yourself." At one point, I pass a bakery where the cupcakes are doing a tiny synchronized dance in the display window. Nobody bats an eye. Why would they? It's just a Tuesday in Off-the-Railsville. By evening, I'm strolling back to my apartment, feeling unreasonably good about the state of the world. My phone hasn't buzzed all day, not even a spam call, and I realize I haven't missed it. The city feels connected in a way that doesn't require Wi-Fi. Sure, the begonias are a little smug, and I'm still not sure about the emotional pretzel, but there's a kind of magic to this new normal. It's like we all decided, collectively and silently, to stop being miserable for a day and just vibe. So here's my question to you all. If your world suddenly flipped into cozy absurdity, where the bizarre was just background noise, how would you spend your day? Would you chat with your breakfast pastries, join a telepathic subway soap opera, or try to decode the wisdom of emotionally complex snack foods? Let's hear it. Yesterday, I was wandering through Whole Foods, not because I needed anything specific, but because it's one of my happy places. The smell of fresh bread, the endless bins of bulk snacks, and the soft hum of overpriced calm. It's like my church, okay? I was in the tea aisle, holding a box of chamomile and debating if I needed another when it happened. Out of nowhere, I heard it. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. No kidding, they were playing that song over the speakers. Do you remember it? I hadn't thought about it in, 20 years? But there I was, standing frozen with a box of tea in my hand, practically seeing Jeffrey the giraffe prancing down the aisle with his gang of kids who somehow had every toy imaginable. I swear, the fluorescent lights even dimmed for a second, like the universe decided to stage a flashback just for me. In my head, I wasn't in Whole Foods anymore. I was 8 years old, clutching my dad's hand as we walked into the Toys R Us back in Littleton. My dad always said we were just looking, but we both knew I'd leave with something. Probably a Polly Pocket or a Barbie. Do you remember the smell of those places? That mix of plastic and cardboard and, I don't know, dreams? I could almost feel the rough texture of those laminated shelves, how they towered over me like skyscrapers back then. And the click, click, click of shopping cart wheels over the tiled floor. God, I hadn't thought about that in ages. I'm not going to lie, I got emotional. Not full-on crying the tea aisle emotional, but I felt this warm little lump in my throat, like a hug from the past. And then, because the universe is hilarious, I reached for my bag and pulled out my bell. Yep, the bell I ring to reset the energy in rooms. I figured, why not reset my own energy right there in the middle of Whole Foods? I gave it a soft chime, and this woman in the coffee aisle shot me a look like I just summoned a seance. Whatever, Brenda. Anyway, the song kept playing, and I kept standing there, stuck in this magical time warp. I thought about how my mom would take me to Toys R Us after dance recitals, still in my sparkly leotard and itchy tights, as a treat for making it through without tripping. And how sometimes I'd pick out something tiny like a slap bracelet, just so I could save the rest of my toy karma for Christmas. It wasn't about the toys, though, not really. It was about the feeling, that moment of standing in front of the shelves, knowing the world was big and bright, and that you could take a tiny piece of it home with you. I swear, nostalgia is like time travel. 1 second, you're debating if organic chamomile is really worth $8.99. And the next, you're a kid again, wondering if the Easy Bake Oven is really as magical as the commercial made it look. Spoiler, it was not. Those brownies were disgusting. But the thing that got me most, like really got me, was realizing how much I missed that sense of wonder. Don't get me wrong, I love my life. Teaching yoga and mindfulness is the closest thing I've found to magic as an adult. But back then, wonder wasn't something you had to practice. It just showed up like an uninvited but welcome guest. Every time you walked into a toy store or heard a jingle on TV or found a rock shaped like a heart in the backyard. And then, just as quickly as it started, the song ended and I was back in Whole Foods. I laughed at myself for being so sentimental, tossed the chamomile in my cart. Yes, I bought it and moved on to the hot bar where I promptly spilled some lentil soup because I wasn't paying attention. I guess you can time travel, but you can't escape being a klutz. So now I'm sitting here, sipping my overpriced tea, still thinking about that moment and wondering how many other memories are tucked away in random jingles or old toys or the smell of sidewalk chalk. It makes me want to keep my bell handy, not just for resetting energy, but for waking myself up to the past every now and then. What about you? What random moment has brought you back to those warm times you may have even forgotten about? So, I woke up this morning expecting the usual racket. The creak of the old heater kicking on, my neighbor's overly ambitious lawnmower, maybe my dog, Moose, barking at a squirrel who dared to breathe in his line of sight. Instead, I opened my eyes to find Moose perched on my chest, giving me this weird, judgmental look, normal enough, except this time he spoke. About time you woke up? Do you even realize how boring mornings are for me while you snooze away? Now, I'm no stranger to strange dreams. I once dreamt I was a sentient pine cone, but this didn't feel dreamlike. For starters, Moose's breath smelled very real, like a combo of old kibble and the forbidden pile of chili fries he got into last night. I blinked a few times, rubbed my face, but Moose just sighed and hopped down. Alright, I guess I'll just entertain myself like always. Maybe eat another sock. That'll show you. Confused? Absolutely. But hey, when life hands you a talking dog, you roll with it. Or at least, I do. That's when things got weirder. As I stumbled into the kitchen to make coffee, my favorite mug, green with a tiny chip on the handle, chimed in, "Oh, great, him again. Just because I'm your favorite doesn't mean I enjoy getting scalded every morning, you know." Ever thought about a cold brew? I stared at the mug, then at Moose, who had plopped down in the corner with a "you're on your own" buddy expression. The coffee pot muttered something about doing all the heavy lifting, while the spoon lamented its constant exposure to hot liquids and sticky sugar granules. By the time I poured my coffee, I had officially joined the ranks of people who argue with inanimate objects. But it wasn't just the kitchen. As I walked around the house, everything had an opinion. My hiking boots, worn down from years of trails, groaned about my heavy steps. Could you pick up your feet once in a while? We're not young anymore. The fridge demanded I stop opening its door to just stare, while the toaster taunted me for always burning my bagels. At first, I thought I'd lost it. Maybe I'd inhaled too much campfire smoke on last weekend's wilderness trek. But as the day went on, I realized I kind of liked it. There was something oddly comforting about hearing my flannel shirt, still draped over a chair from yesterday, grumble, "You think I'm just a piece of fabric? I've been through rainstorms and burrito stains for you. Show some respect." I couldn't stop laughing. My couch accused me of over-squishing the cushions. My mismatched socks debated over which one of them was luckier, and the ceiling fan smugly pointed out that I only turned it on when Moose farted in the living room. Moose, naturally, found this hilarious and added his 2 cents. You do, though. When I stepped outside to see if the strangeness was confined to my house, the whole neighborhood joined in. My Jeep, already a diva on good days, refused to start, huffing. Maybe if you gave me a wash once in a while, I'd feel motivated. The mailbox, stuffed with junk flyers, groaned. Do I look like I have room for another pizza coupon? Even the streetlights flickered indignantly when I walked under them, muttering, "Oh, here he comes, the guy who jaywalks constantly." I decided to test the limits of my newfound reality by heading to my favorite hiking trail. Nature, surely, wouldn't have much to say, right? Wrong. The trailhead sign scoffed at my usual route choice. "Oh, taking the easy loop again? Big surprise." The trees rustled with sarcastic whispers about tourists, while the wind teased me by blowing my hat off twice. I even heard a distant hawk screech something that sounded suspiciously like, "Nice socks, loser." Despite the non-stop commentary, I couldn't stop smiling. Sure, it was strange, but it was also delightful. My world, usually so quiet and predictable, had come alive in the most unexpected way. Even Moose seemed to enjoy it, especially when he convinced my camp stove to cook his lunch first by buttering it up with compliments. By the time I made it back home, arms sore from carrying a very opinionated hiking backpack, I realized something. If everything had a voice, if every little object and creature around us could express itself, we'd probably take better care of things. Maybe I'd finally oil that squeaky door hinge that's been begging for mercy. Or give my Jeep the car wash it so clearly craves. Or, I don't know, thank my socks for keeping me blister-free all these years. Anyway, that's been my day so far. Moose is now snoring loudly on the couch, which groaned dramatically as he climbed on, but seems to have accepted its fate. My phone keeps pinging to remind me of emails I don't want to answer, and I'm half expecting my slippers to stage a mutiny when I shuffle off to bed later. So, what about you? Have you ever imagined something as crazy and fun as this? If you woke up to a world where everything had its own opinion, what do you think your stuff would say about you? Be honest. What would your coffee mug call you out for? Okay, so picture this. It's a Tuesday afternoon, and I'm standing in the electronics aisle of Walmart, staring at a wall of HDMI cables like they hold the secrets of the universe. I had one job: pick up a cable for my dorm setup. Simple, right? Wrong. Because the moment you give me more than 3 options for something, my brain goes full if-else statement mode, and I'm debugging the entire process like my life depends on it. Do I need the basic $10 cable? Or is the $40 one gonna magically make my monitor glow like the Eye of Sauron? The decision tree was spiraling out of control. Anyway, I'm standing there overthinking like a champ when a guy, maybe mid-30s, taps me on the shoulder. He's wearing a Cubs cap and holding a box of Ethernet cable. "Hey, do you know if this is what I need for internet?" he asks. And I, the self-proclaimed tech guru who just aced a beginner Python course, nod with the kind of confidence only a 19-year-old who hasn't paid a real internet bill in his life can muster. "Oh yeah, totally. That's perfect." Spoiler alert, it was not perfect. The guy thanks me, and I go back to my cable crisis, eventually settling on a mid-range option because it feels like the safe bet. I head to self-checkout, feeling like I've done my good deed for the day. But as I'm leaving, I see Cubs Cap again, now in line at customer service, looking at his phone with the kind of face you make when you realize you've been bamboozled. Turns out, what he needed was a modem, not Ethernet cable, and my advice was about as helpful as trying to run a program without importing libraries. I freeze, and for a solid 10 seconds, my brain's just blue screening. I should have apologized. I could have apologized. But instead, I did what any mature adult would do. I ducked into the frozen food aisle and pretended to inspect a bag of pizza rolls like it held the cure for imposter syndrome. I left the store feeling like a fraud, spiraling into an existential crisis over how much I'd messed up. If I can't even give decent tech advice, what business do I have majoring in computer science? Am I a glitch in the system? A human error? The runtime exception nobody caught? Flash forward to later that night. I'm back at my dorm, still feeling guilty, when my roommate Kevin walks in holding this massive gaming keyboard he just bought. "Bro," he says, "help me set this up?" I laugh nervously because after my Walmart fiasco, I'm convinced I'm cursed. But I agree. We plug it in, download the drivers, and for some reason, the lights won't sync. He's getting frustrated, and I'm over here Googling like my life depends on it. Eventually, I figure out that his laptop doesn't support the RGB software because his OS is outdated. I update it, and boom, rainbow lights everywhere. Kevin looks at me like I just hacked into the Pentagon. "Dude, you're a wizard," he says. And I swear, I've never felt prouder. That's when it hit me. Life isn't about having all the answers. Sometimes you mess up. Sometimes you accidentally tell a guy at Walmart that Ethernet cables are the solution to all his problems. But the important thing is to keep learning, keep debugging your mistakes, and when you can, be the reason someone else's keyboard lights up like a Christmas tree. So, here's my question. Have you ever had one of those moments where you thought you had it all figured out, only to realize you were hilariously, catastrophically wrong? What did you learn from it? The morning was already starting to roast like a batch of coffee beans in a forgotten pot. Phoenix in November is like a cat with mood swings. One day it's sweater weather, and the next it's like, surprise, you live in the desert. But mornings are my favorite, especially my bus stop mornings. The street's alive in this quiet but buzzing way, like everyone's got a secret, and they don't even know it yet. I love looking at the little things, stuff no one seems to notice but feels weirdly huge when you stop to think about it. Like how the old guy at the corner always checks his wristwatch and then double checks his phone. Or how a whole row of strangers will somehow end up shifting their weight at the same time. Like we're all in a poorly choreographed dance nobody agreed to. Today there was this couple sitting on the bench, heads bowed so close over one phone I swear they were conspiring. I imagine them plotting some adorable crime, like sneaking into a botanical garden at midnight to repot an orchid. It made me smile, but then my eyes caught this guy walking past with the most ridiculous socks, like bright green with flamingos and tiny hats. And that was it. I had a moment. Flamingo socks guy reminded me why I do what I do, why I sketch on napkins during my break, and turn pillowcases into dresses after midnight. It's the little things, you know? The things nobody notices, but are loud as hell if you have the right kind of ears. Speaking of ears, there was this woman with headphones in, waiting for the light to change. She was nodding her head so hard to whatever she was listening to, and I thought, yes, queen, you dance on that invisible stage. But then I noticed the guy next to her was kind of bobbing too, not like he could hear her music, but like her vibe just leaked into his. It was subtle, but it was there, and it hit me how weirdly connected we all are, even when we're pretending we aren't. Like, what if her playlist was a chain reaction and everyone at the crosswalk ended up tapping their feet by the time the light turned green? Maybe this is how revolutions start. Not with shouts or signs, but with a really good beat. I work part-time at a thrift store, And if that's not the ultimate stage for life's tiny moments, I don't know what is. Last week, a guy came in and bought a dusty accordion. I mean, who buys an accordion? It was one of those things you'd think was cursed in a cheesy movie, but he looked so stoked, like it was a golden ticket to something magical. It's stuff like that that makes me feel like I'm visiting an alien planet. Like, people are just out here living these wild, specific lives and we'll never know most of the story. Maybe Accordion Guy is starting a polka punk band. Maybe he's using it to woo a mysterious woman he met on a train. Maybe he's just gonna make noise until his neighbors file a petition. Who knows? It's amazing. And then there's the thrift store itself, which is basically my second brain at this point. I found this old suitcase the other day, the kind with stickers from cities like Paris and Cairo, and I thought, what if this suitcase could talk? I pictured it spilling tea about glamorous train rides or somebody smuggling a diamond necklace and a pair of socks. Then I decided to turn it into a jacket instead, like literally a jacket. I cut the leather into panels, lined it with this funky teal fabric, and now it's hanging on a rack at the store. Somebody will buy it eventually, and then that jacket will have a new story. That's the magic of what I do. I get to take something forgotten and give it a chance to be noticed again. But sometimes it's not the big projects or the quirky characters that make me stop and blink at the world. It's tiny things, like how everyone at the bus stop looks at their phones when the light rail pulls in, even if they're not expecting a message. Or how the barista at my favorite cafe always makes the foam on my latte look like a lopsided heart. Or how there's this dog that barks at exactly 8:02 a.m. every morning, as if it's clocking into a shift. It's all so oddly organized, like we're part of this secret system we didn't sign up for but somehow run like a machine. I wonder if aliens would find our mornings fascinating or just baffling. Would they think it's wild that humans use rectangles of glass to look at the world instead of, just looking at it? Would they see the woman who brings her cat to the bus stop in a baby stroller and assume she's our leader? I think about this kind of stuff a lot, which probably makes me sound like the world's nosiest neighbor, but I can't help it. I've always been this way. Curious, nosy, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, maybe I'm just standing at a bus stop in Phoenix, surrounded by people who probably think I'm staring into space. But really, I'm taking notes, observing this weird, beautiful, messy thing we call society. It's like being a tourist in a city I live in every day. And honestly, I hope I never lose that feeling. What part of our everyday society makes you feel like a traveler in your own world? So, this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I have this thing I do whenever I have a crush. And not just a crush. I'm talking about any flicker of romantic interest, even if it's just a cute barista who spells my name right on a cup. Like boom, it's over for me. I start auditioning for them. Yeah, auditioning. Here's the scene. I'm pouring coffee or running entrees at the restaurant, and suddenly, I catch myself staring a little too long at the reflection in the ketchup bottle on table 6. Why? Because my brain has decided it's now the perfect time to rehearse an impromptu romantic comedy monologue, like some Hugh Grant knockoff who doesn't quite know how to button his shirt properly. It's not subtle either. I'll do the tilted head look for extra vulnerability, tossing a sigh, and in with a smirk so disarming I should probably register it as a concealed weapon. My coworkers? They've caught me mid-performance more times than I can count. One time, during the lunch rush, I got assigned to this outdoor patio table where a girl with these huge sunglasses, the kind where you can see the whole world reflected back at you, was waiting for her date. She looked bored and kind of irritated, so naturally, I decided I was the romantic lead in this situation. I sauntered over like I was auditioning for the role of a lifetime. Waiter with mysterious charm, and asked, "Can I get you anything to drink? Or is it just the sweet nectar of anticipation keeping you company today?" I swear I even winked. She didn't laugh. She just kind of blinked at me like I was a stray cat that wandered in from the alley. Her date showed up 2 minutes later, and my manager told me to stop being so extra because it was making the customers uncomfortable. But the thing is, I can't help it. It's like my brain has this setting where every interaction is a scene that needs delivering. And when it's a crush, forget it. I'm pulling every tool from the emotional toolbox. Vulnerable smiles? Check. A dramatic pause while pretending to clean a glass? You bet. I once recited an entire sonnet from memory because the girl I liked made an offhand comment about Shakespeare. Shakespeare, for crying out loud. Who even does that? I guess it all started back in high school, when I realized that people love a good story. My first big romantic move was in sophomore year. There was this girl I liked who was really into theater, so naturally, I thought, why not confess my feelings through a soliloquy? Because, nothing says date me like quoting Hamlet. I stood in the middle of the cafeteria, hands raised dramatically, and declared, to love or not to love. There is no question, because you, Sarah, are the only answer. I got a standing ovation from the speech club. Sarah? She transferred schools. Okay, fine, she didn't transfer because of me, but the timing was suspicious. Now here I am, 23 years old, working tables in Los Angeles while chasing my big break, and this little quirk of mine hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, it's gotten worse because, well, LA is full of reflective surfaces. Mirrors in bathrooms, windows on cars, the gleaming countertop of the diner where I work. I can't even walk past the polished toaster in my apartment without running lines and making soulful eye contact with my own distorted reflection. Oh, and sunglasses. I have this thing for sunglasses. Not wearing them, no, I'm not that cool. I mean, practicing scenes in the mirrored lenses of other people's sunglasses. I swear, I don't do it on purpose. I'll be at work, taking someone's order, and suddenly, I'll catch sight of my face in their shades. And then it's like, action, a tilt of the head, a soft furrow of the brow. Maybe I'll mutter something that sounds deep, but is really just, do you want fries or salad with that? My friends think it's adorable. My boss thinks I need professional help. But honestly, I think my biggest quirk comes after I get the crush's number, or in rare cases, their Instagram handle. I can't just text, hey, it was nice meeting you. No, I have to build the narrative. My opening lines are always straight out of a bad indie film. For example, hey, this is Chris, the guy who spilled an entire tray of water on you at table 4. Can I at least make it up to you with a drink sometime? Or, hi, it's Chris. I noticed you left your napkin behind at the diner, so I rescued it. Should we call it fate or just really good timing? 9 times out of 10, they don't reply. But on the rare occasion that they do, I panic. Like full-on, pacing around my apartment panic. My go-to move? Voice memos. And not normal ones like, hey, what's up? I'll literally perform a monologue about how I just happened to find this amazing coffee shop with vibes that are totally you, and then end it with an awkward laugh to sound spontaneous. One girl told me she played it for her roommates, and they all thought I was in a weird one-man play. She ghosted me the next day. So, yeah, that's my thing. I audition for the people I like. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But hey, you never know when one of those performances might land me a starring role. In Love, or maybe just in the next rom-com. Anyway, enough about me. What about you? Do you have any little dating quirks you've never told anyone about? Please, someone out there, tell me I'm not the only one rehearsing love in the reflective surface of a frying pan. Okay, so this is one of those stories where if it were a book, the title would be something pretentious like How Jane Austen Saved My Life, but only after ruining it first. Spoiler alert, Jane Austen didn't actually save my life. What she did do, though, was teach me a pretty big lesson about not letting my own stubbornness run the show. Let me explain. It started on a Thursday. I know it was a Thursday because I remember thinking, is there anything more existentially pointless than a Thursday in February? It was the kind of gray, soggy day we specialize in here in Oregon. I'd opened my bookstore, the dog-eared page, as usual, brewed myself a French press of mediocre coffee, and settled in for what I assumed would be a slow day. That's when he walked in. Now, don't get too excited. He wasn't some brooding, windswept Darcy type here to sweep me off my feet and make me question all my choices. No, he was a grumpy old man wearing a rain-soaked bucket hat, smelling faintly of wet dog and yesterday's coffee. His name was Carl, and Carl had opinions, with a capital O, about literature. He came in every Thursday to browse and to remind me, loudly, that my entire inventory was a pile of overhyped drivel, which, for Carl, included everything from Hemingway to Harry Potter. I once suggested he try something lighthearted, like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and he looked at me like I'd just suggested we burn the store down for warmth. So Carl comes in, grumbles his way over to the classic section, and I do my usual thing. stay behind the counter, sip my coffee, and brace myself for whatever literary crime I've apparently committed that week. About 15 minutes later, he slaps a battered copy of Pride and Prejudice on the counter. I blink at him. You've made your thoughts on Jane Austen extremely clear. I say, because Carl has, on multiple occasions, referred to her as the godmother of frivolous nonsense. I've changed my mind, he says. Thought I'd give her another shot. Now, I should have just rung him up and moved on with my day. But something about the way he said it, like he was daring me to call him out, rubbed me the wrong way. So instead, I leaned forward and said, "What happened, Carl? Did your book club threaten to revoke your membership?" "That was a mistake." Carl glared at me, muttered something about how you young people don't know how to mind your own business, and stormed out without buying the book. Great. Another thrilling chapter in my ongoing saga of alienating my most consistent, and honestly, only Thursday customer. Here's where the story turns into a slow-motion train wreck, starring yours truly. A couple of hours later, I decided to kill time by rereading Pride and Prejudice myself. Not for the first time, mind you, this was like my 10th or 11th read-through. But as I got to the part where Elizabeth Bennet verbally demolishes Mr. Darcy during his terrible first proposal, something clicked. Elizabeth, smart, stubborn, fiercely independent, wasn't just one of my favorite fictional characters. She was me, or at least, she was me on my worst days. Quick to judge, slow to forgive, and absolutely convinced that I was always right. I sat there, staring at the page, and realized I'd just pulled a full-on Darcy with Carl. Sure, he was grumpy and opinionated, but who was I to mock him for trying something outside his comfort zone? All I'd done was make him feel like a fool for it. And for what? A cheap laugh? Some misguided sense of superiority because I loved Austen and he didn't? It hit me like a hard cover to the face. I was wrong. And worse, I was proud. Not the good kind of pride where you feel great about acing a test or baking a perfect loaf of sourdough. The bad kind. The kind that makes you think you're better than someone else just because you've read Emma 3 times and they haven't. So the next Thursday, I waited. I brewed Carl's usual blend of coffee, dark roast with a splash of cream, no sugar, and left a copy of Pride and Prejudice on the counter with a sticky note that said, "I was wrong. Jane's better than I am. Give her another shot." When Carl walked in, he raised one scraggly eyebrow at the coffee and the book. For a second, I thought he was going to storm out again, but instead he grunted something that sounded suspiciously like thanks and took the book without saying another word. A couple of weeks later, he came back with a different copy of Pride and Prejudice, a beautiful leather-bound edition that looked like it belonged in a museum. He slapped it on the counter and said, "You were right. She's not half bad." Then he handed me the book and said, "Thought you should have this. My wife used to love Austen too." It turns out Carl's wife had passed away years ago, and he'd been avoiding her favorite books ever since. But for whatever reason, he decided it was time to stop running from them. And I nearly ruined it for him with my big mouth and my bigger ego. So that's the story. The moral? Don't let your pride turn you into a jerk. And maybe, just maybe, give people the benefit of the doubt, even if they're grumpy, bucket hat-wearing contrarians who think Hemingway was overrated. Now it's your turn. Have you ever let your stubbornness get in the way of something or someone important? What did it take for you to realize it? And what did you learn from it? I promise I won't judge, unless you say something bad about Jane Austen. Then all bets are off. I was 14 when I figured out I had to lie to keep things running smooth around here. Not big lies. Nothing crazy, just the kind that keep Mom's eyebrows from going all archy and Dad from sighing so heavy you'd think the weight of the world rested on his shoulders and not just the family minivan's squeaky transmission. Little lies are easy. They slide out soft like butter off a hot knife. "Yeah, I'm doing fine in school, no worries." Or, "Nah, of course, I didn't skip soccer practice." But big lies? Those stick. And they've got teeth. The summer I turned 19, I told the biggest one yet. I said I'd landed a part-time job at Mr. Lang's hardware store, learning the ropes. I told them over dinner one night. They nodded approvingly, fork scraping plates, and I thought, maybe this is the kind of lie that doesn't bite back. Turns out I was wrong about that. See, Mr. Lang didn't know he'd hired me. He'd actually hired this quiet guy named Ralph who wore the same blue flannel every shift. Ralph couldn't care less about his job, but I cared a lot about the $8.50 an hour his name tag represented. So I started showing up to the store, not on the payroll or anything, just lingering, stocking shelves here and there, pretending to sweep the floor, greeting customers with an eager, "Can I help you find anything?" like I wasn't a total fraud. Mr. Lang must have assumed someone else had cleared me. Ralph, meanwhile, seemed cool with our unspoken arrangement. "You're doing me a favor, man," he said one afternoon, tossing me a worn work vest. Less crap for me to do. It went okay for a while. I pocketed a few 20s from the till every week, enough to keep the charade alive. I even started liking the place. The way the shelves smelled like sawdust, the rhythm of the cash register dinging, the old-timers who came in for bolts and left with stories about their busted lawnmowers. But of course, good things don't last. Lies definitely don't. The trouble started with a lawn chair. Some lady came in asking for one, and Ralph pointed her toward me. "He knows where stuff's at," he said, yawning like the lazy bum he was. I didn't know squat about lawn chairs, but I sure as hell pretended. "Follow me," I said, leading her to aisle 6. Only, there weren't any chairs. The shelves were bare, except for some dusty plastic tarps and a lone garden hose. Looks like we're out," I stammered. She squinted at me, her sharp eyes cutting like scissors through wrapping paper. "Ouch," she said. "That's funny. I saw them online. Said you had 2 in stock." My heart did this dumb flutter thing, like a bird trapped in a chimney. I tried to play it off cool, mumbling something about inventory being wonky sometimes. But she wasn't buying it. "I want to speak to the manager," she snapped. Ralph snickered behind the counter as I scrambled to find Mr. Lang, who, when he finally showed up, gave me this long, hard look. It was the kind of look that says, "Who the hell are you, kid?" I bolted before he could ask any questions. I didn't even grab my fake paycheck from the register. I just ran out the back door. Didn't stop until I was halfway home, sweaty and gasping for air, the reality of my stupidity crashing over me like a cold wave. When I walked into the house that evening, Dad was watching TV in his recliner, and Mom was flipping through a gardening catalog at the kitchen table. "How was work?" she asked, not looking up. "Fine," I lied, the words sticking to my tongue like gum. "Just fine." And that was the end of it, at least for them. They never found out what really happened, but I couldn't shake the shame of it, the way it sat heavy in my chest like a rock I'd swallowed whole. I stopped lying so much after that, not because I became a saint or anything, but because I finally realized the thing about big lies. They don't just bite back. They leave scars. It started with the watch, as it always does. I don't know why I even bothered winding it that morning. It hasn't ticked in 23 years. Not since that night in the cemetery when old Mrs. Beauregard's ghost gave me what I like to call the Savannah Scare of '01. But winding it feels ritualistic, like drinking tea from a chipped teacup or locking a door twice, even though you know it's secure. It's about the motion, not the purpose. The day was meant to be unremarkable. I was running late, as usual, for my 10 o'clock ghost tour. I'd forgotten my usual breakfast, 1 lumpy banana and black coffee, but grabbed a peach from the kitchen on my way out. A peach! Let me tell you something about peaches in November. They're lies. They smell like summer but taste like regret, and this one was no exception. I tossed it out the window of my ancient Buick Skylark halfway to the historical district. The Buick, by the way, is more rust than car, and the fact that it started that morning should have been my first clue that something unusual was brewing. The first tour group was smaller than usual, just 5 people. A young couple with matching ironic t-shirts. His said boo, Felicia, and hers had a picture of Casper dabbing. Plus an older gentleman with a camera that could have doubled as a telescope. Then there was a college kid who looked like she'd been roped into coming by her mom. And finally a wiry woman with a red scarf, and the kind of haunted look that made me wonder if she'd seen more ghosts than I had. Now, I've given this tour more times than I can count. I could do it blindfolded, backward, and hungover, which, let's be honest, I have. But that day, every word felt like silk slipping off my tongue. The stories, the jokes, the little asides I usually throw in to keep the skeptics entertained. It all just landed perfectly. When I told them about the pirate who allegedly haunts the Marshall house, I swore I saw the old man with the camera wipe away a tear. By the time we reached Wright Square, The group was eating out of the palm of my hand. That's when the first weird thing happened. We were standing under the oak tree where Alice Riley was hanged back in the 1730s. I always tell the story of how she and her lover murdered their employer. A tale of desperation and revenge that ends with Alice supposedly cursing the city as she swung from the noose. And they say her ghost still roams this square. I added, leaning in conspiratorially, especially on days like today when the air feels just a little too still. As if on cue, a gust of wind swept through the square, rustling the Spanish moss overhead. The woman with the red scarf gasped audibly. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "See what?" I asked, genuinely intrigued. She pointed toward the statue in the middle of the square. There was someone standing there, just for a second, a woman. Now, I've seen my fair share of skeptics turn believers in this line of work, but there was something about the way she said it that sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced at my pocket watch, out of habit more than anything, and froze. The hands were moving. I don't think I said anything for a full 10 seconds. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. The watch hadn't ticked in over 2 decades. But there it was, the second hand sweeping gracefully around the face, like it had never stopped. "Is everything okay?" the college kid asked. "Fine," I lied, snapping the watch shut and slipping it back into my pocket. Just unexpected. The rest of the tour passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the world was suddenly a half step out of sync. The air felt electric, like the moments before a thunderstorm, and everything seemed sharper, the colors brighter, the sounds crisper, even the uneven cobblestones beneath my boots more pronounced. After the tour, I decided to take a detour on my way home. Something was pulling me toward Bonaventure Cemetery, though I couldn't have told you why. It wasn't part of my usual route, but when you've been in Savannah as long as I have, you learn not to question the little nudges. The cemetery was empty when I arrived, save for a man sitting on a bench near the old live oak that marks the grave of Gracie Watson. He was older, with a wide-brimmed hat and a cane carved to look like a serpent. I'd seen him before, once or twice, always in the cemetery, always alone. "You've got the look of someone chasing shadows," he said as I approached. "Funny," I replied. "I was about to say the same thing to you." He chuckled, a low, gravelly sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep within the earth. "What brings you here today?" "Honestly, I don't know." I hesitated, then pulled out the pocket watch. This thing started working again. Figured if there's a place to make sense of that, it's here. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the watch. "That's not just a timepiece, you know. That's a tether." "A tether to what?" "To whatever you saw that night in the cemetery," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the horizon. "You think it's coincidence it stopped ticking then and started again now? Time's funny that way. It bends and twists, but it doesn't break. You might want to figure out what it's trying to tell you before it stops again." I wanted to ask him what he meant, but before I could, he stood up and tipped his hat. "Good luck," he said, walking off into the trees. I sat there for a while, turning the watch over in my hands. The second hand was still moving, its quiet tick-tick-tick echoing in my ears. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just telling stories, I was living one. And for one brief, shining moment, everything felt alive and warm, as if the world had tuned itself perfectly to my mood. I don't know what the watch's resurrection means, or why that woman saw someone in the square, or who the man in the cemetery really was. But for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. Have you ever had a day when it felt like life was playing the perfect melody? Alright, let me tell you about the one day that made me think the universe might actually have a sense of humor. Like, maybe it's sitting there with popcorn, occasionally throwing in plot twists to keep us on our toes. So, picture this. It's a Tuesday, mid-March, the kind of day that feels like it got lost in the calendar shuffle. My gig for the day, jumping out of a moving truck for this low-budget action flick, got canceled last minute because the director, aka some guy with a GoPro and dreams, forgot to secure a filming permit. Classic. Anyway, I'm sitting in my car, still wearing half my gear, elbow pads, shin guards, the works, and I realize I have no idea what to do with myself. So, I start driving. No destination, just cruising through LA traffic, which is basically like playing Tetris with cars. Eventually, I end up downtown and park near this random coffee shop I've never noticed before. It's tiny, wedged between a pawn shop and one of those stores that only sells incense and weird crystals. It smells like cinnamon and burnt espresso inside, and the barista has this look like he's been up since the Nixon administration. I order a black coffee because I'm boring like that, and as I'm waiting, I notice this little old man sitting at a table near the window. He's got this massive sketch pad in front of him, and he's drawing something with these bold, messy strokes. His hands are flying like he's on a deadline, and he's muttering to himself. I'm nosy by nature. I mean, wouldn't you be if your job involved literally throwing yourself in a drama? So I casually shuffle over to take a look. Oh, no, don't just stand there. Sit, he says, waving me over without looking up. His accent is thick, European, maybe Russian. I plop down because, honestly, why not? The guy has this energy like he's the boss of wherever he is, and I'm intrigued. He's sketching what looks like me. Well, not me, but a figure in motion. Someone falling. My gear must have tipped him off, but the detail? Wild. You could see the tension in the limbs, the way the hair streamed upward like gravity was taking a personal day. I crack a joke. Guess it's obvious what I do for a living, huh? He finally looks up, squints, then grins. You're not a dancer. You're too reckless. Acrobat, maybe. No, es un woman. He says it like it's the most natural thing in the world. I nod, and he just starts laughing, this deep belly laugh that makes everyone else in the cafe glance over. You fall for a living, he says, shaking his head. How many times? Now, here's where my ego kicks in. I puff up a bit and tell him, 273 times. And counting. Yes, I keep track. Don't judge me. It's like my weird, bruised version of a gold star chart. He smirks like I'm some overzealous kid bragging about a lemonade stand, then flips the page in his sketch pad. The new drawing is of a bird, wings spread wide, caught mid-flight. It's beautiful and chaotic all at once, like it's trying to escape the paper. Falling and flying, he says, tapping the page with his pencil. Two sides of the same coin. People think falling is failure, but no. Falling is movement. Falling means you tried. Okay, so now I'm hooked. Who is this guy? A philosopher moonlighting as an artist? I ask him what he does, and he shrugs like it's no big deal. Used to paint. Now I draw. It's cheaper. That's when I notice the initials in the corner of the bird drawing. VK. The name clicks in my head like a puzzle piece sliding into place. This guy is Vladimir Korolenko. The Vladimir Korolenko. I saw a documentary about him ages ago. He was this big deal painter back in the 80s, had exhibitions in New York, Paris, you name it. Then he disappeared. No one knew why, and there were all these wild rumors. Drugs, depression, an affair gone wrong. And here he is, chilling in a dingy coffee shop in LA, sketching strangers and rambling about falling. I don't say anything because, honestly, what do you even say to that? Instead, I point at the bird drawing and ask, what's its story? He tilts his head, considering. It's not a bird. It's a person dreaming they are a bird. They will wake up and forget how to fly. That is how life works. It's such a simple thing to say, but it hits me right in the chest. How many times have I woken up, all the adrenaline and magic from a stunt fading, replaced by mundane stuff like grocery lists and overdue bills? How often do we all forget to fly? We keep talking for another hour about everything and nothing. He tells me he left the art world because it was too noisy, and that he's been happier sketching anonymously. He says he loves LA because no one cares who you are, they're all too busy chasing their own dreams. And then, just as suddenly as our conversation started, he snaps his sketchbook shut, slings on a beat-up leather bag, and says, "Thank you for falling." I laugh, confused. For what? For showing me the ground is not so scary, he says with a wink. And then he's gone, out the door and into the chaos of downtown. I sit there for a minute, replaying the whole thing in my head. Did that really just happen? Was that actually Vladimir Korolenko, or just some eccentric guy with a talent for sketching and cryptic wisdom? I'll never know for sure, but when I walked back to my car that day, I couldn't stop smiling. It felt like I'd been handed a secret, a little wink from the world, reminding me that falling and flying aren't so different after all. So, now I'm asking you, have you ever felt like the world gave you a playful You know those days when you're just sitting there, and some random thought pulls you down a rabbit hole of memories so vivid, you'd swear you could step back into them? That happened to me last night. I was lying on my couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain slap against the window. Classic Portland. I don't know why, but suddenly I could smell my old bedroom from when I was 13. Not the one my parents redid when I moved out, but the original. Messy, loud, and totally me. Posters curling at the edges, a drawer full of broken headphones, the faint smell of incense I wasn't supposed to have. It wasn't a big room, just enough space for my twin bed, a rickety desk, and a hand-me-down TV with a built-in VHS player. God, that TV. I watched Titanic on it so many times the tape finally snapped one summer, and I cried like it was a real tragedy. It sat on a stack of milk crates my dad tried to throw out, but I insisted I needed for storage. Translation: I wanted them because my older brother said they made me look cool. Most nights, I'd sit cross-legged on the ugly purple carpet with my best friend, Kendra. She always smelled like cinnamon gum and had a laugh so contagious it could derail an entire conversation. We'd make up these ridiculous stories while flipping through the latest 17 or some junk mail catalog. One of our favorite games was picking outfits for some imaginary prom we'd never go to. I can still hear her saying, "Girl, if you wore this, you'd be the queen of the whole damn planet." And then she'd pick something for herself, usually something covered in glitter, and declare, "I'd be your fabulous alien co-ruler." We thought we were so funny, sitting there with our braces and bad eyeliner, pretending we'd rule the world. God, we were invincible. After our ruling sessions, we'd walk down the street to the corner store with crumpled dollar bills in our pockets, half stolen from the couch cushions. I can still taste those lime popsicles that stained our tongues electric green. The owner of the store, Mr. Tran, always gave us a hard time, joking that we were keeping him in business one candy bar at a time. He had this little bell over the door that jingled like magic when we walked in, and it always felt like stepping into another world, a place where nothing bad could happen. On Friday nights, when my parents were too tired to notice, Kendra and I would sneak out after midnight and climb onto the roof of the old elementary school. The stars seemed brighter back then, or maybe we were just looking harder. We'd talk about everything. Boys we liked but would never actually approach, the future we swore we'd conquer, and that secret fear neither of us admitted until much later. What if we didn't make it out of our little town? Kendra would always bring her mom's old Polaroid, which is probably where I got my thing for cameras. She used to say, "Pictures don't lie. They keep the good stuff alive." We took the dumbest photos. Us pretending to be rock stars, a stray cat we named Captain Whiskers, my face pressed against the school's grimy skylight. She left them all with me, but now I kind of wish I'd given some back. She'd probably laugh herself to death looking at them now. It's funny the things that stick with you. Like how the streetlights on the walk home made these perfect little circles of light that we'd try to jump between, pretending the asphalt was lava. Or the way the air smelled in the summer, dry, with just a hint of gasoline from somebody's leaky lawnmower. Even now, whenever I catch that scent, I'm 13 again, walking barefoot down my cul-de-sac with Kendra, trying to dodge tiny rocks that felt like daggers underfoot. I don't even know when it all started to fade. One day, Kendra stopped coming over because she got a boyfriend who didn't think alien co-rulers were cool. I found other friends, got into photography, and eventually moved to Portland, leaving my milk crates and broken VHS tapes behind. I think my dad finally threw out that old TV. Sometimes I wonder if it ended up in an actual landfill or some weird secondhand shop where another kid might have played Titanic on it for the 100th time. Even now, when I explore abandoned places, I catch glimpses of those nights. I'll see an old Polaroid left behind on a cracked windowsill, or a rooftop with a perfect view of the stars, and for a split second, I hear Kendra laughing. I leave one of my photos behind in places like that. It feels like a tribute, like maybe someone someday will pick it up and feel the same warmth I do when I remember those stupid, perfect moments. Anyway, that's where my mind went last night, deep into a time machine made of popsicle sticks and Polaroids. It's funny how the little things stick with you, even when the big stuff starts to blur. What about you? What little thing from your past always brings a smile to your face when you remember it? Okay, so picture this. It's 6 a.m. on a Saturday, and I'm standing knee-deep in the Pacific, wearing an oversized wetsuit that smells like kelp and questionable life choices. I've got my marine rescue face on, which is basically me trying not to cry, because there's a sea lion pup tangled in a mess of fishing line about 20 feet away. I call her Princess Flop, because every time a wave comes, she just kind of flops, like zero survival instincts. I'm trying to convince her to chill long enough for me to get the line off, and I'm talking to her like she's an old college roommate. Listen, Flop, I know life's tough, but we're gonna get through this, okay? You just gotta work with me. Anyway, Flop has other ideas, and she's not exactly cooperative. By the time I get her untangled and she flops back into the water like nothing happened, it's almost noon. I'm soaked, starving, and ready to call it a day. But as I'm walking back to my car, still dripping and trying to ignore the fact that my wet suit is basically a mobile sauna, this older couple waves me over. Now, here's the thing about San Diego. People either completely ignore you, or they want your entire life story in one conversation. These two, life story people, they tell me they're visiting from Minnesota, and they saw me saving the poor little sea lion, and wanted to say thanks. Before I can even explain that it's my job and not some heroic act, they start asking me about local spots, like where they can see dolphins or cool tide pools. I mention La Jolla Cove, and the wife, her name is Margie because of course it is, lights up and says, "You know, we've always wanted to kayak with the sea lions. Is it worth it?" Now, my brain says, just recommend a tour company and go home. But my mouth says, oh, totally worth it. In fact, I'll take you myself if you want. Why did I say that? No clue. Maybe it was Margie's earnest little smile, or maybe I was just high on kelp fumes. Either way, 30 minutes later, I'm in a rental kayak with two Minnesotans who have never seen an ocean, paddling out toward the caves. Margie is a talker. She's asking me everything. How do sea anemones work? Have you ever seen a shark? Do dolphins really have names for each other? Meanwhile, her husband, Dan, is mostly silent, concentrating way too hard on not tipping the kayak. At one point, a harbor seal pops up right next to us, and Margie screams like it's a celebrity sighting. "Oh my gosh, it's a seal. Hi, little guy." The seal, unimpressed, snorts and disappears, but Margie's day is made. Then the wild part happens. As we're heading toward the sea caves, I spot something dark moving under the water. At first, I think it's just a shadow, but then it surfaces, and I realize it's a pod of dolphins. Not one or two, but like 10. They're weaving around the kayaks like they're playing tag, and Margie loses her mind. "Dan, look at this. It's like National Geographic." I'm freaking out too, but trying to play it cool like, oh yeah, they do that sometimes. No big deal. Meanwhile, inside, I'm like, holy dolphin party, Batman. Then one of the dolphins does this full-on leap out of the water, and Margie is laughing so hard she almost drops her paddle. "This is the best day of my life," she yells, and honestly, same, Margie, same. But wait, it gets better. As we're floating there, this sea lion, I swear it's Princess Flop, pops up out of nowhere. She's just staring at me like, "Oh hey, it's you again. Got any snacks?" Margie, of course, assumes I'm some kind of sea animal whisperer. "Do they all know you?" she asks, and before I can answer, Dan, who has been silent this whole time, deadpants. Of course. She's the mermaid queen. I lose it. Like, full on, can't breathe laughing. Margie starts calling me Queen of the Sea. And by the time we paddle back to shore, they've invited me to dinner at their hotel. I try to politely decline, but Margie insists, saying, "You gave us the best day ever. The least we can do is buy you some food that doesn't smell like fish." So, a few hours later, I'm sitting in this fancy hotel restaurant, still smelling faintly of salt water, eating the most ridiculously good steak I've ever had. Margie and Dan are telling me about their kids and their dog, and Margie's tearing up over her margarita because she's so grateful I gave her a perfect day. And honestly, it was a perfect day. Looking back, it feels like something out of a movie. Like, what are the odds I'd meet these random people, take them kayaking, and end up with this unforgettable little adventure? Life's weird like that. Sometimes you're just trying to rescue a sea lion, and the universe hands you dolphins and free steak. Have you ever had a moment that felt crazy but left only happy memories? So, I'm setting up outside Caesars, warming up for my usual Friday night gig, right? The crowd's decent, not packed, but enough to feel the buzz. I've got my deck in one hand, the other flicking a coin like some second-rate Robin Hood, and this kid in a Spider-Man hoodie sidles up. He's maybe 10, full of that wide-eyed wow energy kids have before the world tells them magic isn't real. He points at my cards and asks, "Do you have the 9 of hearts?" Now, I could have done the obvious, pull it out while the kid move on, but I'm not that guy. I give him the show. 9 of hearts? I repeat, arching an eyebrow like he's just uncovered some ancient secret. I shuffle, let the cards fan out, and bam, snap my fingers. A single card flips out of the deck, lands face up on my shoe. 9 of hearts. The kid loses his mind, and for a moment I swear I've got superpowers. That's when I feel it, this smell wafting through the strip. It's not the usual combo of hot asphalt, tourist sweat, and street food. No, this is different, sweet and buttery, with just a whisper of something charred. Like popcorn, but not quite. It hits me like a sucker punch. Suddenly, I'm not in Vegas anymore. I'm 7 years old, standing in my grandma's kitchen in Pahrump, Nevada, watching her stir this gigantic pot of caramel corn on the stove. Grandma had this way about her, you know? She was like a magician in her own right, turning the most basic stuff, sugar, butter, a pinch of salt, into something that made your whole soul feel hugged. She didn't use a recipe, just eyeballed it every time, tossing handfuls of popcorn into the pot like she was casting spells. And I swear, no store-bought junk ever came close to hers. I'd sit at her table, legs swinging, waiting for her to pour the golden, sticky mess onto a sheet of wax paper. And the sound? God, the sound of caramel bubbling, popping, sticking. It was a symphony. The kind of thing you didn't know you'd miss until it was gone. That smell on the strip? It was close enough to pull me back. I could almost hear her humming old Patsy Cline tunes, feel the warmth of her kitchen, see the goofy plastic owl clock that always blinked one eye slower than the other. For a split second, I even thought if I turned my head fast enough, I'd see her there in her apron, spoon in hand, ready to scold me for trying to sneak a taste too soon. But no, just tourists shuffling by. The kid in the Spider-Man hoodie tugging his mom's sleeve to tell her about the Magic Man. And here's the thing, it wasn't even real caramel corn. I tracked the smell down to a food cart selling cinnamon churros of all things. But it didn't matter. The memory had already hit me like a freight train, and for the rest of the night, I couldn't shake it. Every trick I did, whether it was the disappearing coin or the card that magically appears in someone's back pocket, felt like a tribute to her. Grandma wasn't a fan of Vegas, thought it was too loud and full of phonies, but man, she would have loved the idea of me making people believe in a little magic. After the gig, I didn't head to my usual dive bar. Instead, I went home, Googled homemade caramel corn, and spent 3 hours burning batch after batch in my tiny apartment kitchen. The smoke alarm went off twice, and my cat, Houdini, was so traumatized he wouldn't come out from under the couch. By 2 a.m., I had something that kind of resembled Grandma's. It wasn't perfect, too much salt, not enough butter, but when I took a bite, it was like opening a secret door straight into my childhood. Here's the wild part, it didn't just bring back her kitchen. It brought back me, the kid version, the one who thought magic was real, who believed people could hold a bit of wonder in their hands. It's funny, isn't it? How something as simple as a smell can make you feel like you found the best hidden trick in the universe. So, here's my question for you. What little things bring you back to moments that always warm your heart? Alright, so there I was standing in the middle of the dollar store parking lot, staring at a spilled jar of pickles like it held the secrets of the universe. And no, before you ask, I hadn't been driving too long and gone loopy. This was just my life in all its unvarnished glory. Let me back up a minute though, cause this story ain't about pickles. Well, not entirely. I just rolled back into town after a 2-week haul, coast to coast, pulling a trailer full of Lord knows what most of the time. That morning, my boss had informed me over the CB radio that my load to Idaho got canceled, and I could head home early. Free weekend? In my world, that's like winning the lottery. So naturally, I stopped at the dollar store to pick up a few essentials. Milk, bread, maybe a box of those little Debbie brownies if I was feeling fancy. Anyway, I'm in the checkout line, and I see this teenager working the register. She's got blue streaks in her hair and the kind of eyeliner that could cut glass. She's sighing real loud every time she scans an item, like the weight of the world rests on her skinny shoulders. Meanwhile, the guy in front of me is buying every can of Vienna sausages in the store. A whole cart full. No exageración. I'm talking at least 50 cans. Now, I'm not one to judge. Vienna sausages got me through some lean times, but this was extreme. When it's finally my turn, I make some dumb joke like, guess he's preparing for the sausage apocalypse. And this kid just stares at me. Blank. Nothing. Not even a courtesy laugh. That's when I knew I needed to get out of there before I embarrassed myself further. So I grab my bag and head out the door. I'm almost to my truck when bam, the bag splits wide open, and that jar of pickles I didn't even need goes rolling out like it's late for a meeting. The jar shatters right there in the parking lot. Glass everywhere, pickle juice dripping down the curb, and I'm just standing there, feeling ridiculous. Here's the thing. Normally, I'd have been mad. Like the kind of mad where you mutter to yourself for 5 minutes and maybe kick a rock for good measure. But for some reason, I wasn't. I stood there looking at this sad little pickle graveyard, and instead of cussing, I laughed. Not a polite chuckle, either. I laughed. A full-on belly laugh, like I hadn't in months. And that's when it hit me. Life is just one big jar of pickles, ain't it? You try to hold it together, carry it around carefully, and still, it slips out of your hands sometimes. Sometimes, all you can do is stand there and laugh at the mess. It got me thinking about how often I try to control things that ain't mine to control. Like I'll stress myself out over a delivery route, worrying about weather or traffic, even though I've been doing this job long enough to know that worrying won't change squat. Or I'll get worked up over something breaking down in the truck, forgetting that I'm pretty good at fixing things when it comes to it. Heck, I even stress over my garden. Those tomatoes either grow or they don't, you know? Standing there, surrounded by busted glass and pickle juice, I realize how much time I spend fighting the inevitable instead of just letting it happen. I don't know if it was the exhaustion from the road or the absurdity of the situation, but it felt like the universe was trying to tell me something. Like, hey Cheryl, maybe stop being so dang uptight. So what did I do? I cleaned up my mess, of course, went back inside, grabbed another jar of pickles, because I'll be damned if I let one clumsy moment deprive me of my favorite sandwich topping, and apologized to the sighing teenager at the register for coming back. She rolled her eyes at me like I was ruining her life, but I just smiled. Who knows what she's going through? Maybe her pickles are spilling in ways I can't see. Later that night, I was sitting on my porch, my old tabby cat Elvis curled up in my lap, watching the sun set over the hills. I had that new jar of pickles open next to me, a cold beer in my hand, and I felt light, like I'd let go of something heavy I didn't even know I was carrying. It's funny how a moment like that can sneak up on you. I'd spent 45 years on this planet, 20 of them behind the wheel of a truck, and it took a jar of pickles to teach me the simplest truth. Sometimes things break. Sometimes you just gotta laugh and keep moving. So, here's my question for y'all. Have you ever had one of those little moments sneak up on you in the middle of something completely ordinary? Like, you're just minding your business, and suddenly, life hits you with a lesson you didn't know you needed? If you've got a story, I'd love to hear it. And if it involves pickles, well, all the best. It was junior year, and if you told me then that I'd be where I am today, sipping coffee in an overpriced cafe while reminiscing about my teenage years, I'd have laughed in your face. Back then, the only thing I could think about was how to stay invisible. But no matter how much you try to blend into the wallpaper, high school's chaotic vortex has a way of dragging everyone into the drama. And let me tell you, when it came for me, it wasn't subtle. It was like a wrecking ball with a vendetta. The whole thing started because of Senior Prank Week, the annual tradition where the seniors would unleash their collective inner chaos demons on the school. It was usually harmless. Last year, they filled the principal's office with helium balloons. But this year, they decided to aim bigger. And by bigger, they let loose 50 live chickens in the hallways. I remember that morning vividly. The bell had just rung, and I was shuffling to chemistry, head down, earbuds in, trying to avoid any and all eye contact. Suddenly, someone screamed, "Chickens," and I yanked my earbuds out, thinking I'd misheard. Nope, there they were. Dozens of squawking, flapping chickens running amok. One of them leapt onto my friend Luis's backpack and just perched there, like it was its new throne. Luis looked at me deadpan. "This is it. This is how civilization ends. Death by poultry?" I replied, because what else do you say in that moment? Then a teacher came running down the hall, yelling, "Who did this?" Which was hilarious, because what did she expect? A chicken to raise its wing and confess? The thing about high school is that it runs on rumors, and by third period, everyone was buzzing about how the prank had gone terribly wrong. Apparently, the chickens were supposed to be tagged with numbers. 1, 2, 3, skipping 4, and ending with 5. The idea was to make the administration waste hours looking for the non-existent number 4. Classic prank, right? Except no one accounted for the fact that chickens are, living creatures with minds of their own. Half of them escaped out the back door, and someone claimed they saw a flock of them waddling toward the football field like they were staging a protest. By lunchtime, the prank had reached legendary status. But the chaos didn't stop there. No, because life is never that simple. That same day, during fifth period, the football team decided it was time to settle their ongoing feud with the basketball team. Apparently, it all started over some dumb argument about whose sport was harder, which turned into a cafeteria brawl. I was sitting in the corner with my tray of questionable meatloaf, watching the whole thing unfold like it was an episode of Jerry Springer. Punches were thrown. Someone got slammed into the mashed potato station. The lunch lady tried to break it up with her broom, but ended up whacking the school mascot by mistake. And then, in what can only be described as the plot twist of the century, the lacrosse team stormed in and stopped the fight. They didn't even say a word, just stood there arms crossed until everyone sheepishly backed off. It was like some bizarre animal kingdom hierarchy, lacrosse clearly being the apex predator. By the end of the day, the school felt like a war zone. Feathers in the hallways, mashed potatoes on the ceiling, and me just trying to get to my locker without slipping on chicken poop. But the real kicker came later during the school assembly. The principal, a man who looked like he hadn't smiled since the Reagan administration, stormed onto the stage with the intensity of a drill sergeant. "Who is responsible for this?" he bellowed, and the entire auditorium went silent. You could have heard a chicken cluck, and then from the back of the room, someone coughed and said, "The lacrosse team." It wasn't true, of course, but by then, the lacrosse team had become these untouchable, mythical figures, and nobody dared to rat out the real culprits. The principal sighed, rubbed his temples, and muttered something about early retirement. Looking back, it's funny how the most chaotic moments end up being the ones that stick with you. High school wasn't easy for me. Nobody tells you how hard it is to navigate all the social minefields while dealing with your own insecurities. But somehow, amid all the absurdity, there were these moments of pure, unfiltered humanity. Like Luis and me sitting in the hallway, laughing about the chicken perched on his backpack, or the way the lacrosse team managed to command respect without saying a word. Would I go back if I could? Not a chance. But I'm grateful for the memories, feathers, fistfights, and all. You know what's funny? The moment I decided to start dating again, the universe handed me a front row ticket to the shit show of my life. Like, I swear, there was a cosmic sign somewhere, flashing in neon letters. Stay single. For your own safety. But no, I thought, hey, maybe this time will be different. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. And honestly, the only thing worse than heartbreak is the secondhand embarrassment from the dumb things I've done to avoid it. Take this one guy, Kyle. We matched on one of those apps because, of course, how else do people meet these days? At first, he seemed decent. Not too many gym selfies, spelled your and your correctly in his bio, and had a dog, which always earns bonus points. We started talking, and for once I thought, wow, he actually wants to have conversations. He'd ask me about my day, share random facts about space. Did you know a day on Venus is longer than a year? Me neither, until Kyle. So, I agreed to meet him, and oh my god, he was so much taller than I expected. Like, basketball player tall. Meanwhile, I'm barely hitting 5'2" on a good day. Our hug was this awkward thing where I ended up chest level with his stomach. But whatever, tall guys, short girls, it's a vibe, right? Dinner went fine at first. We talked, laughed. He told me about his dog, Rocket, and I was already mentally planning our third date. Then, halfway through dessert, he pulls out his phone, flips it around, and says, "So, what do you think?" I look at the screen, expecting a picture of Rocket or maybe a dumb meme. Nope, it's a photo of a ring. A freaking engagement ring. Now I'm sitting there, fork midair, trying to decide if he's joking or if I somehow stumbled onto one of those hidden camera prank shows. Turns out it was neither. This man, this stranger, wanted my opinion on a ring he planned to give to his girlfriend. His actual girlfriend of 3 years. Apparently, he'd been using the app to practice flirting so he could keep things spicy in his relationship. I don't even remember how I left, but I do remember eating a pint of cookie dough ice cream straight from the carton that night while rewatching The Office for the billionth time. You'd think I'd have learned my lesson after Kyle. But no, because then came Emily. Yes, Emily. I figured maybe dating women would be less of a disaster. Spoiler alert. Wrong again. Emily was artsy, with these gorgeous tattoos and an obsession with vintage cameras. Our first date was at a flea market, where she showed me how to haggle over a $3 ceramic owl. By the third date, I was practically swooning every time she called me babe. Then, one morning, I get this text, "Hey, I need to tell you something." And instantly, my stomach drops because nothing good ever starts with that sentence. Turns out, Emily wasn't just dating me. She had 3 girlfriends. 3. And get this, she thought I knew. I mean, didn't you notice how busy I always was? She said like being polyamorous was the same as having a packed work schedule. For the record, no, I didn't notice. I thought she just liked her alone time. After that, I swore off dating altogether. Told myself, I don't need anyone. I'll just adopt a cat, maybe 2, and live my best single life. But then came Jake. Jake, with his stupidly perfect smile and his knack for making me laugh at the most inappropriate times. We met at a friend's party, and it was like every cheesy rom-com cliche rolled into one. He spilled his drink on me, I called him a klutz, and before I knew it, we were talking about everything from favorite childhood cartoons to our shared hatred of cilantro. For 3 months, everything was perfect. He made me playlists, cooked me breakfast, and even introduced me to his mom. And just when I thought, finally, someone normal, he dropped the bombshell. I don't think I'm over my ex. I didn't yell or cry. I just nodded, said, okay, and walked out. Then I went home and cried into a pillow until my throat hurt. Because, of course, it wasn't about Jake. It was about every date that ended in ghosting, every time someone lied or cheated, every time I let myself hope only to have it crushed. And now I'm here, venting to you like some tragic anti-Cupid. I know it sounds bitter, and maybe I am a little. But can you blame me? Dating feels less like finding love and more like playing Minesweeper, where one wrong step blows everything up. Still, part of me can't let go of the idea that maybe, just maybe, there's someone out there who'll prove me wrong. Someone who'll make me laugh so hard I snort, who'll hold my hand during thunderstorms, and who won't turn out to be married or poly or secretly hung up on their ex. Until then, though, it's just me and my cat and that pint of cookie dough ice cream. I was sitting on the corner of Royal and Connie, my usual spot, watching the world spin by, when it hit me how much folks today live their lives like they're the stars of their own little movies. You ever noticed that? I mean, there's always been something theatrical about New Orleans. The street performers, the artists, the way people saunter through the quarter like they're in some Creole fever dream. But these days, it's different. It's like everyone's got a camera roll full of moments they're ready to script into stories. And you know what? You kinda dates. Take this girl I saw yesterday. She was leaning against a lamppost, face tilted up to catch the sunlight just right, tucking a selfie with an iced coffee in her hand. I swear she must have taken 50 shots before she got the one she wanted. She wasn't shy about it either. A couple tourists walked by and gave her the side eye, but she just kept working that angle like it was her job. And in a way, I guess it is. Maybe she's got 1 million followers, or maybe she just wanted to feel like $1 million. Either way, I couldn't help but smile. The confidence it takes to stand in the middle of the sidewalk and say, this is my moment? Man, that's something. It's not just the selfies, though. People don't just pass through a scene anymore. They curate it. I see folks adjusting their scarves, standing on tiptoes to get the cathedral spires framed just so in the background. Even the tourists used to snap a picture and call it a day. Now, they're setting up full productions with tripods and light reflectors. A couple weeks back, There was a guy dressed like he just stepped out of a 1920s jazz band. He wasn't playing or busking like me, just posed in front of my buddy Pete's trumpet solo like he owned the era. I caught his eye and said, "Man, you look sharp. You a musician?" He grinned and said, "Nah, just vibes. Just vibes." That stuck with me. The thing about living here in New Orleans is the city itself is always performing. The balconies drip in with beads left over from last Mardi Gras. The way the air feels heavy with music and gumbo. It's all part of the show. So maybe that's why I don't mind the way people act like the main character these days. It's not so different from what we've been doing for centuries, is it? We just got better cameras now. I've been playing on these streets for a good 20 years, and let me tell you, I've seen people do a lot of things to leave their mark. I've seen a guy freestyle rap to a brass band until the crowd was throwing dollar bills like it was rain. I've seen kids so tiny they couldn't even talk yet, banging on upside-down buckets like they were born to drum. And now I see kids holding up their phones, narrating the whole thing for their followers. Out here in NOLA, they say, "Catching vibes, y'all." And you know what? That's their version of banging on buckets. That's their way of playing the city. It's funny though, for all this tech we got now, some things haven't changed a lick. The other night, I pulled out my harmonica, my lucky one, the one I've had since I was just a scrappy kid dreaming of making music, and started playing a slow, mournful tune. There was a couple sitting on a bench nearby, looking like they just had a fight. They weren't talking selfies, weren't posting nothing. Just sitting there, not talking, let their shoulders do all the speaking. I don't know what made me do it, but I started to play St. James Infirmary Blues. Real soft, like I was whispering it through the reeds. The guy looked up first, then the girl. They didn't say a word, but by the time I hit the last note, they were holding hands. Now tell me this, what kind of post could capture that moment? What kind of filter would you use for something that real? I guess that's the part one love most about all this. For every carefully planned snapshot, there's still a world of unscripted beauty happening in the cracks. You just gotta know how to see it. I've been thinking about getting one of those fancy phones myself. Maybe starting up a TikTok or something. I mean, why not? If folks want to record their lives, why shouldn't I get in on the action? I could show the world what it looks like from my side of the street, the way the sunlight hits my saxophone just right, or the rhythm of a crowd dancing to a second line. But part of me wonders if that'd ruin the magic, you know? Like, would it still feel the same if I was watching it all through a screen? What about you? Is there something folks do these days that just makes you stop and smile? Something small, maybe even silly, that reminds you life ain't so bad after all? So this morning, I woke up to what I can only describe as the most surreal thing that has ever happened in my life. And listen, I've had some weird days. Like last semester, I tripped over a seagull, don't ask, while holding a tray of dissected squid samples. The squawks of that bird still haunt me. But this tops it. At first, it was normal. You know, sunlight streaming through my one stubbornly crooked blind, my fan making that soft whir-whir clunk noise it does when it's dying. I reach for my phone like a zombie, check my texts, nothing new there. Then I went to brush my teeth. That's when it hit me. My toothbrush greeted me. Morning sunshine. Ready for some oral hygiene? I froze mid-squeeze. The toothpaste tube snorted. Don't just stare at her, genius. Brush. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tess, you finally cracked. Too many late-night crab dissection reports have scrambled your brain. And honestly, same. But it didn't stop there. My sink started complaining about how much hair I shed. Do you think it's easy swallowing all that? I'm a drain, not a wig storage. My mirror joined in, commenting on my bedhead like some catty aunt at Thanksgiving. I barely processed that before the shower head chimed in, complaining about how I always hog the hot water. I just stood there, staring at my bathroom like it had turned into some warped reality show. The weirdest part? It wasn't creepy. Not like horror movie creepy. It was like finding out your house is full of really opinionated roommates you didn't know you had. And honestly, they were funny. My coffee maker, for example, apparently has aspirations of becoming a philosopher. You ever think about how coffee is just life's way of giving you fake energy to chase fake goals? My blender, on the other hand, thinks coffee machines are pretentious. Oh sure, everyone loves the coffee maker, but who saves your smoothies when you're on a health kick? Huh? By lunchtime, I was kind of vibing with it. My microwave walked me through how to perfectly reheat pizza. One button isn't rocket science, babe. And my couch gave me a pep talk about why I should finish my overdue assignments. Procrastination only feels good until the panic kicks in. Trust me, I've seen you spiral. It's not wrong. Then the animal started talking. I know what you're thinking. Tess, you're making this up? But I swear, my neighbor's cat, Jupiter, strolled into my apartment like he owned the place. He does this all the time because I leave my patio door open and casually said, "Took you long enough to wake up. You snore like a dying walrus, by the way." I almost dropped my sandwich. What? Did you just call me a walrus? Yes, and I stand by it, Jupiter said, tail flicking like he hadn't just shattered every law of nature. Anyway, you're out of tuna. How do you even live like this? After a brief internal panic, I realized this might actually be amazing. Like, who wouldn't want to have a chat with animals? I spent the next hour sitting on the floor, peppering Jupiter with questions. Turns out he thinks dogs are just wannabe wolves and has very strong opinions on birdwatching. Too mainstream, he said, licking his paw. But the best part? When I went outside, it wasn't just Jupiter. Every squirrel, bird, and bug had something to say. The seagulls by the beach are absolute jerks, not surprising. And the fish at my favorite dive spot? Incredible conversationalists. There's this parrotfish I've named Senor Crunch because, they crunch coral, and he told me he doesn't actually like coral. It's just a branding thing. Meanwhile, a nosy damselfish I call Miss Chatterbox spent 20 minutes grilling me about why humans wear shoes. Do your feet not work? Sounds fake. By dinner time, I was in full acceptance mode. My rice cooker hummed a lullaby while my fridge reminded me to throw out the questionable yogurt at the back. Even my sneakers got in on it, arguing over which one of them was the favorite. Spoiler, they're both jealous of my flip-flops. Now, here's the kicker. After the initial shock wore off, I realized how comforting it all is. It's weird having a ceiling fan with a god complex, but it's also kind of nice not feeling so alone. I live by myself, and as much as I love my own company, this feels like living in a sitcom. Except instead of kooky neighbors, it's my furniture and the occasional cockroach who won't stop bragging about his survival skills. So, here's my question to you all. If you woke up one day in your house and the local wildlife could talk, would you embrace the chaos? Or would you go full hermit mode and pretend it wasn't happening? Personally, I'm leaning into it. Who wouldn't want to know what their houseplants really think of them? Spoiler, mine hate me. Apparently, I water them too much. Who knew? You ever have one of those nights where it feels like the stars are aligning just for you? Like the universe whispered, "Tonight, you're the main character?" That's exactly what I thought last Friday when I walked into Riley's pub wearing my favorite leather jacket. The one that makes me feel like James Dean, but with less cigarette smoke and more department store cologne. The bar was packed, people spilling out onto the sidewalk, laughter rolling through the air like music. I was riding the high of a long overdue payday and a fresh haircut. I promised myself I was just there for a drink or two, but fate clearly had other plans. She walked in about 20 minutes after me, this woman with wild curls and a smile that could level a city block. Her name was Kara. Or Kara. I'm honestly still not sure because by the time I worked up the courage to talk to her, we were both 3 drinks deep. But let me tell you, those first 30 seconds of conversation? Fireworks. She had this way of talking, like every word was an inside joke I was desperate to be in on. And when she laughed at something I said, something dumb, like a joke about the jukebox playing the same 8 songs, it felt like winning the lottery. We started playing pool, which I'm terrible at, by the way. Every shot I missed, she teased me, calling me shark bait and making fake pouty faces. At some point, her hand brushed mine as she leaned over the table to line up a shot. And I swear, time did that thing it only does in movies where everything slows down except for the thudding in your chest. One thing led to another. Pool turned into more drinks turned into sitting close enough at the bar that our knees touched. When the bartender gave last call, I thought the magic was over. But instead of a goodbye, she grabbed my hand and said, "Come on, let's keep this night going. I know what you're thinking. How could I not go?" It felt like every nerve in my body was vibrating at the same frequency as hers. Her apartment was small but cozy, with string lights hanging in the living room and a cat named Moose glaring at me from the armrest of a couch. We kissed as soon as the door shut behind us. That kind of kiss that's all heat and urgency, like the world's about to end and you're trying to cram a lifetime into one moment. I won't get into the details, but let's just say the chemistry wasn't just a bar thing. It was fireworks and adrenaline and a kind of freedom I hadn't felt in years. But here's the thing about freedom. It comes with a crash. I woke up before her, sunlight streaming through the curtains onto her face. For a second, I just sat there, taking in how peaceful she looked. But then it hit me, this weird cocktail of emotions. Exhilaration, sure, but also guilt and something else I couldn't name. I thought back to all the casual flings I'd had in the past. Some fun, some awkward, and a couple that left me staring at my ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering what I was doing with my life. Was this going to be one of those? Was she? I didn't want to wake her, so I scribbled my number on a napkin I found on her counter and left it on the coffee table. I left quietly, but the whole walk home, my mind was a mess. Part of me was giddy, replaying snippets of the night like a highlight reel. But another part kept nagging me with questions I didn't have answers to. Why did it feel so good in the moment, but so hollow now? Was I chasing something real or just running away from being alone? The funny thing is, I actually hoped she'd text. I kept checking my phone all weekend, waiting for a message that never came. By Sunday night, I had to admit the truth. It wasn't just the thrill of the hookup that had me buzzing. It was her. She wasn't just another face in a sea of fleeting connections. But that's the thing about nights like that. They're like shooting stars. Beautiful, rare, and gone before you can make a wish. Maybe she felt it too. Maybe she didn't. I'll never know. What I do know is that every time I think about Kara or Kara, I feel this ache. Not regret, exactly, but something close to it. Like I stumbled on a treasure chest, only to realize I left the map behind. Since then, I've been asking myself some hard questions about what I really want, what I'm really looking for. Is it the spark of the unknown, the thrill of spontaneity? Or is it something deeper, something that lasts longer than a night and leaves more than just a memory? I don't have the answers yet, but I'm working on it. Maybe the next time I meet someone who feels like a spark, I'll have the courage to see if it can turn into a fire. Or maybe I'll just end up at another bar, chasing another shooting star. Either way, at least I'll have this story to tell. Okay, y'all, buckle up because I'm about to tell you a story about a date that started with red flags and ended with, well, something I'll remember for the rest of my life. First off, let me set the scene. Atlanta, middle of July, hotter than the devil's sauna. And I had just wrapped up a case involving a guy stealing lawn flamingos from his ex-wife's yard. Classy stuff. Anyway, I was exhausted, covered in mosquito bites, and the only thing I wanted more than a nap was a plate of fried green tomatoes. Enter Charlie. I met him on a fluke at this farmer's market. He was the guy at the honey stand, scruffy beard, a smile that could melt butter, and the kind of voice that makes you want to lean in just to hear more. He handed me a sample and said, "You look like you could use some sweetness in your life." Cheesy? Sure, but I was tired, and my walls were a little lower than usual. So when he asked me out for drinks, I said yes. We met at this tiny, hole-in-the-wall jazz bar, the kind of place where the sax player is definitely a little drunk, and the bartender knows how to pour a real drink. Charlie showed up wearing a shirt that had probably been ironed with a brick, but his smile made up for it. "You're not going to run a background check on me, are you?" he teased when we sat down. "Depends. Should I?" I shot back, flipping one of my cards between my fingers. That's my thing, my deck of cards. People think it's quirky, but really it keeps my hands busy, so I don't accidentally start interrogating everyone I meet. Occupational hazard. He laughed. "Not unless you're going to dig up my old report cards." I wasn't exactly valedictorian material. We talked about the usual first date stuff, music, food, the absurdity of Atlanta traffic. And it was nice, but nothing earth-shattering. I kept waiting for the moment where I'd catch him lying or overselling himself. You do my job long enough, and you start to see people as puzzles with missing pieces. But Charlie? He was just Charlie. Simple, straightforward, and unpolished in a way that felt oddly refreshing. Then the moment happened, the heartwarming one I promised. I was halfway through a story about a case. A light one, nothing gory. When he reached into his pocket, pulled out a single playing card, and slid it across the table to me. A two of hearts. I stared at it for a second. "You've been snooping on me?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. But inside, I was already building theories. Did he Google me? Talk to someone who knew me? Was he playing me? Charlie shook his head. "No, I've been carrying that card around for years. Found it stuck in the back seat of my old car after my brother borrowed it. It was one of those days when everything fell off like the whole world was tilted sideways. You know? But then I found this card and I thought, maybe it's a sign. Like, keep looking for the other heart, the other piece." I don't know, it sounds stupid saying it out loud. I didn't know what to say, which is rare for me. My job is talking, poking holes in stories, making people explain themselves until they crack. But this guy, this scruffy, honey-selling guy with his wrinkled shirt and crooked grin, he wasn't trying to impress me. He was just telling me something real. So I picked up the card and tucked it into my deck. "Guess you're lucky I'm not a blackjack dealer," I said, trying to play it cool. But the truth? I was touched. And I'm not a touched kind of person. My idea of romance is a guy remembering I don't drink sweet tea. But that little gesture, that random piece of his life he decided to share with me, it hit me right in the chest. The night went on, and we laughed a lot. He didn't try too hard, and neither did I. At one point, he asked, "So, does this mean I passed the private investigator test?" I smiled and said, "Let's just say your file's not closed yet." We dated for a while after that. Didn't work out long term. His job took him up to Asheville, and I wasn't about to leave my cases behind. But that moment, sitting in that smoky bar with the two of hearts between us, stayed with me. Not because it was flashy or over the top, but because it was simple. It reminded me that sometimes people surprise you, not by doing something grand, but by showing you a little piece of themselves they didn't have to share. So, yeah, that's my story. And now I'm curious. Have you ever had a moment on a date that stayed with you forever? People think running a food truck is all sunshine and Instagram moments. Let me tell you, it's more duct tape solutions than cinematic montages. My name's Mick, 47, Seattle native, ex-chef, and proud owner of a rolling jalopy called Flavors on Wheels. It's my Frankenstein food truck, patched together with grit, ambition, and parts from God knows how many Craigslist ads. Some days, it feels more alive than I am. I wasn't always in this life. Back in the day, I was a chef at one of those restaurants where the menus are printed on recycled paper and the wine list comes with an attitude. It was my dream gig at first until it wasn't. The tipping point? A 23-year-old sous chef told me my risotto lacked narrative. Narrative, like it was some kind of short story for food critics. That night, I went home, stared at my sad, empty journal, and wrote one line. "Get the hell out, Mick." So I did. Quitting the restaurant wasn't dramatic. No storming out or throwing knives. It was more like peeling off a Band-Aid. Quiet and a little pathetic. I spent the next few weeks in my apartment, eating cold pizza and binge-watching cooking shows, trying to figure out how to reinvent myself. That's when the food truck idea hit me, like a good punchline you almost miss. I scoured Craigslist for weeks until I found her. A rusted-out step van with Tony's plumbing faintly visible under a coat of peeling green paint. The guy selling it swore it had potential, which is code for, "You'll need to sell a kidney to fix this thing." Still, I bought it. I named her Gertrude because she seemed like she could survive a nuclear apocalypse and still keep chugging along. The early days were chaos. Picture me, a 47-year-old guy, covered in grease and swearing at an engine like it insulted my mother. Every morning, I'd pray that Gertrude would start, and most days she did, after some creative coaxing involving a wrench and what I like to call encouragement profanity. Once she was running, I'd hit the streets of Seattle, ready to serve up what I called experimental soul food. It's basically comfort food with a twist, but calling it that makes me sound cooler. The menu changes weekly, depending on what inspires me, or what's cheap at the market. My most infamous dish? BBG wings. It's exactly what it sounds like. Chicken wings glazed with peanut butter and jelly. They're surprisingly good if you're willing to trust me. Most people aren't, but I've got regulars who swear by them. There's Hank, a gruff fisherman who insists they're better than they have any right to be. High praise from a guy who thinks ketchup is spicy. Of course, not every experiment is a winner. There was the time I tried making savory donuts filled with bacon and blue cheese. They were supposed to be trendy. Instead, they tasted like regret dipped in grease. My journal has a whole section dedicated to disasters like that, which I proudly share with my customers. People love a good food horror story, especially when it doesn't involve their own stomachs. My favorite regular is probably Lily, a college student who comes by every Tuesday. She always orders the same thing. Whatever the special is, no questions asked. Last month, I had a beaten goat cheese quesadilla on the menu. She took one bite and said, "This tastes like dirt, but in a good way." I think that's the best compliment I've ever received. Not every day is fun, though. Like the time a raccoon decided to join me in the truck. I turned my back for 2 seconds, and there it was perched on the counter, gnawing on a bag of flour. We had a standoff that felt straight out of a Western, except I was armed with a spatula and a can of soda. Eventually, it scurried off, leaving me to clean up the carnage. I swear, the little bastard smirked on his way out. Seattle's weather doesn't help. Rain is a constant companion, which means half my days are spent dodging puddles and apologizing to customers for soggy buns. One time, during a freak hailstorm, a chunk of ice the size of a golf ball cracked my windshield. I taped it up with plastic wrap and kept serving because I'm nothing if not resourceful or maybe just stubborn. The best part of this life, though, is the people. Food trucks attract all kinds. Tourists, hipsters, construction workers, and even the occasional eccentric millionaire. One guy in a tailored suit once ordered a burger and tipped me with a rare coin. I Googled it later and found out it was worth $500. Another regular, Teresa, is a single mom who brings her son, Max, every weekend. Max thinks I'm the coolest person alive because I let him write menu ideas on the chalkboard. His latest suggestion? Spaghetti tacos. Honestly, I might try it. Some nights, after the truck's closed and the city quiets down, I sit on the curb with a cold beer, staring at the neon lights reflecting in the puddles. It's a far cry from the Michelin-starred kitchens I once dreamed about, but it feels real in a way that life never did before. I used to think success meant fancy titles and critical acclaim. Now, I know it's hearing someone laugh over their first bite of PB&J wings, or watching Max's face light up when I tell him his taco idea is going on the menu. Life's messy, unpredictable, and often ridiculous. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: sometimes the best meals and the best moments are the ones you never saw coming. Let me set the scene. It was one of those Chicago days where the wind is a little too bold and the clouds hang low, like they're just waiting to ruin your plans. I was supposed to meet a client, this artisanal cafe looking to stock their shelves with my lavender honey, but they canceled last minute. So there I was, standing outside my apartment with nothing to do and a bag of honey jars slung over my shoulder. I had half a mind to head to the farmer's market and see if I could pawn them off to tourists, but then my stomach growled loud enough to scare a pigeon. I figured I'd grab lunch instead, so I turned toward my favorite taco spot. But as I started walking, a random guy, like total stranger, yelled across the street at me, "Hey, you dropped this." He held up a single sunflower. Now, I didn't drop a sunflower because, honestly, who walks around holding a sunflower in November? But I crossed the street anyway, partly because I was curious and partly because he looked so earnest about it. When I got close, he handed me the flower and said, "You look like someone who'd know what to do with this." I didn't, but I took it anyway. "Thanks," I said, because what else do you say to that? Here's where it gets weird. As I stood there holding this random sunflower, a little kid ran up to me, maybe 7 or 8 years old, dressed in a red puffy jacket, and asked, "Is that for me?" Now, I'm not made of stone, okay? This kid had the biggest, roundest eyes, and before I could even think, I knelt down and handed her the sunflower. Her whole face lit up like she'd just been given a pony. She looked at me like I was some kind of wizard. Then she grabbed her mom's hand and said, "He's the one, Mama." I blinked. The one what? Her mom smiled apologetically. She's been on this kick lately where she says she's looking for the one. She means someone nice. Thank you for indulging her. The kid nodded solemnly, like this was a deeply spiritual moment. "You're the sunflower guy." The mom laughed, tugged her along, and that should have been the end of it. But as they walked away, the mom called over her shoulder, "You should check out the conservatory. They're doing a flower show today. Sunflowers everywhere. It's beautiful." And just like that, my plans shifted. I figured, why not? I wasn't in a rush, and something about the idea of a room full of sunflowers sounded like it might lift my mood. So, I hopped on the bus, bag of honey still slung over my shoulder, and made my way to the Garfield Park Conservatory. The place was surreal. It smelled like green, like earth and leaves and something alive. Sure enough, one of the rooms was filled with sunflowers. Their big yellow faces turned toward the skylights like they were sunbathing. And right in the middle of it all was a small group of people setting up an easel and a stool. There was a sign nearby, live painting session, volunteers needed. Look, I'm not the kind of guy who says no to destiny twice in one day. So I walked up to the woman with the clipboard and said, "What's the deal? You need a model?" She looked me over, clocked the bag of honey jars, and said, "Perfect. We're painting still life today. You sit, we'll paint the honey." Next thing I know, I'm perched on a stool, holding a jar of honey in one hand and a sunflower in the other, while 5 strangers squint at me like I'm the most interesting thing they've ever seen. I try to stay still, but my legs started cramping, so I shifted, and the lady with the clipboard said, "Hold it. That's it. That's the pose." I looked down at myself. One leg propped up on a wooden crate, honey jar balanced on my knee, sunflower dangling loosely from my other hand. It felt ridiculous, but something about the way she said it made me think maybe it wasn't. By the time they were done, the room was filled with sketches and paintings of me. Some were detailed, showing every line on my face. Others were abstract, like I was made of smears of gold and yellow. The best one, though, was done by this older guy with a long white beard who looked like he'd been painting since the Renaissance. He captured something I didn't even know I was carrying. This quiet joy, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. When I got up to leave, the woman with the clipboard stopped me. "Take this," she said, handing me a small canvas. It wasn't one of the paintings of me, but a sunflower, its petals spilling out like it couldn't be contained. A thank you for being part of our art. I walked out of there feeling like I just stepped out of a dream. On the bus ride home, I held the painting in one hand and my bag of honey in the other, and I couldn't help but think about how strange it all was. A random guy with a sunflower, a kid who thought I was the one, and now this painting that I'll probably keep forever. Sometimes life just throws a perfect day at you, like it's reminding you that magic exists if you're willing to look for it. Have you ever had a moment like that? A day that felt like the universe was trying to tell you something? So, here's the deal. About 3 years ago, I met the person I was 100% sure was my mortal enemy. Like, I was convinced this woman was sent by the universe to challenge me in some kind of cosmic boss battle. Her name's Maya, and she's now my girlfriend, which is why this story's funny in hindsight, but oh man, my first impression of her was, let's call it suboptimal. It all started at a game dev meetup here in Austin. You know the vibe, warehouse turned hip coffee shop. Half the people there wearing ironic t-shirts and arguing over whether Unity or Unreal is the superior engine. I was there to pitch this concept I'd been noodling on for a while. A game where you're a houseplant trying to survive neglectful owners. Real cerebral stuff, you know? Anyway, I'm at the snack table double fisting those weirdly tiny cans of LaCroix because social anxiety, and she walks in. First thing I noticed? The look. Maya had this kind of hyper-organized, almost intimidating vibe. Sharp blazer, glasses that screamed, "I can out-logic you," and this polished way of walking, like she was speed-running the intimidate introverts category. My brain immediately went, nope, too serious. Probably hates fun. I whispered to my potos plant that morning, yes, I talk to my plants, don't judge me. Today's the day we find a publisher, but suddenly I'm thinking, abort mission. She's gonna tear me apart. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, I overhear her absolutely destroying someone's pitch. This poor dude's trying to sell her on a game that's basically Frogger but with ducks, and she goes, "It's derivative but not in a clever way. What's the hook? Why should anyone care?" And I'm like, oh no, she's a video game villain. She's Bowser in business casual. Fast forward to my turn to present. I'm sweating bullets, trying to downplay my little playing game because I just know she's going to eviscerate me. I get through my pitch. It's a metaphor for resilience and self-care, blah blah, and she raises her hand. I die inside immediately. She says, "So, is this meant to be ironic? Or are you genuinely asking players to empathize with a ficus?" A ficus. My game stars a pothose. Thank you very much. I felt personally attacked. I think I mumbled something about the emotional depth of houseplants and spent the rest of the night fake laughing at someone else's jokes to avoid her. She even came up to me afterward to give feedback, but I was like, nope, too fragile for this today, Maya. Here's where things start getting weird. A month later, I'm at another meetup because I'm a glutton for punishment, apparently, and Maya's there again. This time, she's running a workshop on storytelling in games. I sit in the back, arms crossed, ready to hate everything she says, and, well, I didn't. She broke down game narratives like they were puzzles to solve, pulling examples from classics like Portal and Undertale, while somehow making obscure indie games sound profound. And then she cracked this joke about how most game devs treat NPC dialogue trees like bad Tinder convos, and I actually laughed. Like real laughed. Not even a courtesy chuckle. Still, I wasn't ready to like her. Not yet. But fate, or the universe, or maybe just Austin's extremely small game dev community, kept throwing us together. She ended up joining my friend's D&D campaign, which I was already in, and she played a bard. A bard! I was like, oh, so now she's going to sing smug critiques at us in iambic pentameter? But no, her bard was hilarious. This chaotic disaster who couldn't hold a tune and once tried to seduce a troll with interpretive dance. It was impossible to keep hating her after that session. Then there was the time we were both stuck waiting out a thunderstorm at the coffee shop after a meetup. She sat down at my table, totally uninvited, and started asking about my plant game. I braced for more snark, but instead, she said, it's kind of brilliant, actually. Everyone's always saving kingdoms or planets in games. No one ever saves themselves. That's what your game's about, right? I don't know what shocked me more, her actually liking my idea or the fact that she got it. Like, really got it? We ended up talking for 3 hours, and I found out she wasn't this cold, hypercritical robot I'd built up in my head. She was just thoughtful, intense, sure, but in a way that made you feel like she actually cared about what you were saying. And funny too, in this dry, sarcastic way that sneaks up on you. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to realize I was into her. I catch myself looking forward to seeing her at meetups or laughing at her dumb D&D puns. She helped me workshop some of the mechanics for my plant game. Well, our plant game now, and somewhere along the way I started thinking, wow, I want this person around. Like a lot. We've been dating for a year and a half now, and she still teases me about how terrified I was of her at first. I tease her right back for calling my protagonist a ficus. But honestly, I'm so glad I was wrong about her. Turns out, first impressions are about as reliable as a Bethesda launch day. So yeah, that's my story. Have you ever been totally wrong about someone at first? I don't know where to start, really. Guess it's like this. You grow up thinking the world's got rules, like real, proper rules, and they're there to keep people safe. Then you hit, I don't know, maybe 22, 23, and realize half the rules are just there to keep the right kind of people comfortable, and the rest, well, they're for show. That's where I was at when this all started. Half jobless, couch hopping, and furious at how easy it is to get screwed for playing fair. Take this gig thing. That's what they call it now, yeah? A gig. Used to be just a job, but now they dress it up like a casual little get-together with your rent money hanging in the balance. I'd been through 5 rounds of applications for some admin assistant thing at this startup that's sold. What was it again? Sustainable cat food. Whatever. It paid decent, so I'm all in. They make me do the whole circus act. Video interviews, personality tests, a task where I had to create a mock campaign for their brand. I spent 3 days working on that. 3 days. Then, radio silence. Nothing. Like I'd never even existed. So one night, I'm sitting in Pete's kitchen, 'cause Pete's couch was where I was crashing that week, and he goes, "You should do it. Seriously, Josie. Go to their office, walk right in, and ask them why they wasted your time." And I'm like, Pete, that's psychotic. But the more I thought about it, the more it didn't sound so crazy. The next morning, I'm standing outside their glassy little office building downtown, trying to psych myself up. There's a receptionist in the lobby, the kind who looks like she could double as a model in her off hours. And she's eyeing me like she's already decided I'm lost. I walk right up to her desk and say, "Hi, I'm here to follow up on an application." She doesn't even blink, just asks, "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I say, "but I've got time, and I think I deserve an answer." Some guy in a blazer overhears this. And next thing I know, I'm sitting in a conference room with one of the managers. He looks so tired, like he spends all day sipping oat milk lattes and regretting his life choices. Look, he says, we went in a different direction. Sorry we didn't let you know sooner. That's it. No explanation, no acknowledgement of the hours I spent working for them for free. I wanted to scream, how is this even legal? But instead, I just said, cool. Thanks for nothing. I left that office knowing two things. One, I was never going to put up with that kind of disrespect again. And two, if the rules weren't going to protect people like me, then maybe it was time to start bending them. When the manager called me into the office, I figured it was about my tendency to come in 5 minutes late every day. I mean, it's just 5 minutes, right? But no, she slid a piece of paper across the desk with a raised eyebrow and said, "This was submitted anonymously." At first, I thought it was a complaint about my borrowing other people's snacks from the fridge, but as soon as I read it, I knew I was in deep trouble. The note said, "He's been bothering women during their breaks. It's uncomfortable." Bothering? Uncomfortable? My brain started racing through every conversation I'd had at work. I'm chatty, sure, but creepy? No way. I told her, this has got to be a mistake. I just talk to people like I'm friendly. That's it. She didn't look convinced. Friendly can be misinterpreted, she said, folding her hands like she was Judge Judy or something. Just try to keep your interactions professional. That's all I'm saying. Fine, professional. Whatever. I just stopped talking altogether if that's what it took. But the thing is, I'd never really thought about how my words landed until that day. And yeah, I might have had a couple of moments in the past where I tried too hard to impress people. Like that time at the office Christmas party when I complimented Laura's shoes, then panicked and followed it up with, not in a weird foot fetish way. She gave me a polite laugh, but looking back, I wanted to slap past me for even saying that out loud. So, I decided to recalibrate. I figured if I kept my head down, I'd stay out of trouble. Easy, right? Wrong. A week later, I ran into Sarah from marketing at the coffee machine. I hadn't spoken to her since the incident. I casually said, "Hey, how's your day going?" Just to keep things neutral. She hesitated, then said, "Fine," and walked off faster than my grandma power walking to a bingo table. It was like that everywhere now. Women avoiding eye contact, group chats falling silent when I walked in. It felt like I was radioactive. Even Brenda, who used to talk my ear off about her cats, started giving me these tight-lipped smiles like I was trying to sell her extended car insurance. I vented to my friend Dave over a beer one night. "It's like I'm public enemy number one just for existing," I said, gesturing wildly enough to knock over my drink. He grabbed some napkins and laughed. "Dude, it's not that deep. Just don't try so hard. Be chill." Easy for him to say. Dave's got that effortless charm that makes people laugh at his dumb jokes. I once saw him call someone broccoli breath, and they thanked him. But me? My jokes land like dead fish half the time. Still, I took his advice. I went full zen. No more compliments, no more jokes, just small talk so dry you could have used it as kindling. "Weather's nice today. Hope you had a good weekend." I even avoided Sarah's desk entirely. No point in risking another cold shoulder. Then came the company happy hour. I tried to skip it, but Dave dragged me along, saying I needed to reset my rep. The bar was loud, crowded, and exactly the kind of place I hated. I nursed my drink in the corner, watching as everyone else seemed to morph into social butterflies. Sarah was there too, laughing with some guy from accounting. I didn't plan on saying anything to her, but then she looked over, caught me staring like a deer in headlights, and said, "Hey." "Hey," I said back, gripping my beer like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. She tilted her head. "You've been kind of quiet lately." "Yeah, just trying to be professional." She raised an eyebrow. "Professional? Okay. Does that mean no more weird shoe comments?" I felt my face go hot. That was a one-time thing, I swear. To my surprise, she laughed. Not a polite, "Please leave me alone" laugh, but an actual chuckle. "Relax," she said. "I'm just messing with you." Turns out, she wasn't avoiding me because of the complaint. She hadn't even known about it. "You can be a little awkward, sure," she admitted, "but it's not like you're a creep or anything. Just don't overthink stuff." I wanted to hug her right there, but that would have definitely landed me back in HR. Instead, I said, "Thanks. I'll work on the awkward thing." From that night on, I took a different approach. I still overthink things, That's just who I am, but I'm learning to rein it in. Sometimes people just want to chat about the weather without me turning it into a monologue about global warming. And yeah, I still screw up occasionally, but at least now I know when to shut up. Most importantly, I've realized that being chill isn't about what you say, it's about being comfortable enough with yourself to not try so damn hard. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting closer. And hey, if I can survive a lecture from Judge Judy and live to tell the tale, I figure I'm doing okay. It was a lazy Sunday, and I was running on fumes. The night before, I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. finishing a sleeve design for a client who wanted a blend of octopus tentacles and clockwork gears, a challenge I both loved and cursed. My brain was fried, my fridge was a barren wasteland of expired condiments, and the only thing keeping me alive was the promise of tacos from my favorite food truck. So, there I was weaving through Austin traffic in my beat-up Civic, lovingly nicknamed Rattletrap. The AC doesn't work, the radio's stuck on some country station from the 90s, and there's a faint smell of burnt toast that I can't track down. But it's my baby. I just parked near the taco truck, planning my usual order 3 barbacoa, extra lime, when I saw her. She came flying around the corner like a tornado in Converse sneakers, clutching what looked like a giant roll of canvas. Her hair was this wild, coppery mess, and she had a face that screamed complicated protagonist energy. Right behind her, a very angry guy in a suit who clearly did not moonlight as a jogger. She sprinted past me, glanced over her shoulder, and without so much as a hi, "How are ya?" yanked open my passenger door and dove in. "Drive," she yelled, shoving the canvas into the back seat. Now, I'm not the kind of person who gets involved in random chases. I have enough chaos in my life. But there was something in her voice, some mix of desperation and adrenaline, that bypassed all my better judgment. So, like an idiot, I floored it. "What the hell is going on?" I asked as we swerved on a South Congress. "Art heist," she said, like that explained everything. "Wait, you stole something?" "Technically, it was stolen first. I'm just stealing it back. For the artist." Long story. The guy in the suit was still chasing us, but now he'd hopped into a sleek black car that looked like it came with its own henchman. He was gaining on us, which, honestly, wasn't hard considering the Civic tops out at a solid 62 miles per hour if you're going downhill with a tailwind. I cut through a side street, narrowly missing a guy on a skateboard, and demanded, "Where am I taking you?" "Just keep driving," she said, fumbling with the roll of canvas. It was partially unwrapped now, and I caught a glimpse of what was on it. This massive, swirling painting of a stormy sky with 2 hands reaching for each other in the middle. It was haunting and beautiful, the kind of thing that makes you feel small and infinite all at once. "Who painted that?" I asked, because clearly that was the most pressing question as we fled from a dude who probably carried a silencer in his glove box. "My ex," she muttered. "Oh, great. So this is about love and crime. Perfect." By some miracle, and a questionable detour through an alley, we lost the suit. We ended up parking behind this sketchy-looking laundromat that reeked of detergent and regret. She sat there catching her breath while I tried to figure out what life choices had led me to this moment. "Okay," I said. "Speed, what's the deal with the painting?" Her name was Kaya, and as it turned out, her ex was a reclusive artist who had gotten tangled up with a shady gallery owner, the guy in the suit. Long story short, the gallery owner had strong-armed him into signing over some of his most personal pieces, including the Storm painting, which Kaya claimed was the one thing that kept him sane during a brutal depressive episode. The painting wasn't just art, it was his lifeline. When he found out it was going to be sold off to some collector who'd hang it in a beach house and forget about it, he lost it. He couldn't do this himself because he's too scared, Kaya said, staring at the painting like it might disappear. So, here I am, his messy, impulsive, kind of badass ex-girlfriend. I snorted. "You forgot to mention dragging strangers into felony territory." She gave me a grin so unapologetic I almost didn't mind. "Well, thanks for being my accidental getaway driver. You did great, by the way. Real fast and furious energy." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Instead, I sighed and asked, "So what's the plan now? Hideout? Black market our trade? What?" Kaya chewed her lip, clearly stalling. Honestly, I didn't think this far ahead. Of course she hadn't. After a lot of arguing, and me swearing I'd never help another random fugitive again, we came up with a plan. I'd drop her and the painting off at some warehouse where the artist was waiting. She promised me this would be the end of it. No more chasing, no more sketchy suit guys. And against my better judgment, I believed her. When we got to the warehouse, the artist, this painfully shy guy in a flannel shirt and paint-streaked jeans, nearly cried when he saw the painting. He kept whispering, I thought it was gone forever, like he was talking about more than just the canvas. Kaya hugged him awkwardly, the way you hug someone you still care about but can't quite fix. As I was about to leave, Kaya stopped me and said, You know, you've got the vibe of someone who understands what it's like to fight for something that matters. You ever need a favor? Look me up. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind next time I'm in the market for a heist partner, I said, rolling my eyes. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about the painting, about how art can carry so much of us, our joy, our pain, our messes, and how sometimes you have to fight like hell to keep it safe. When I got back to the studio, I pulled out the memory jar and added something new, a folded up napkin Kaya had scribbled her number on. It wasn't much, but it felt like a piece of the day, a reminder that sometimes life throws you into someone else's story, and all you can do is hang on and hope for a good ending. So, have you ever been swept into something wild and unforgettable? Because let me tell you, tacos can wait, but adventures, they don't knock twice. Like that? A day that felt like the universe was trying to tell you something. All right, picture this. I'm out in the middle of Cheeseman Park walking my dog Spud, a rescue mutt who looks like a cross between a coyote and a bad decision. It's the kind of crisp Denver morning where the air smells faintly of pine and optimism, and the mountains in the distance look like a postcard someone crumpled just a little. Spud is sniffing every third blade of grass, and I'm standing there scrolling through my phone, fully immersed in the dopamine loop of checking the same 3 apps I checked 5 minutes ago. Suddenly, I glance up, and there's this guy jogging by in one of those head-to-toe compression outfits. The kind that makes him look like an off-brand superhero. And he's listening to a podcast. Out loud. No headphones. Just blasting it for the world to hear. It's some true crime thing about a 1970s heist, and the narrator's all... And that's when he realized the safe had already been emptied. Meanwhile, I'm standing there with Spud, who's now eating a mysterious piece of trash, wondering when this became a socially acceptable thing. Jogging used to be this quiet, solitary activity. Now it's performance art. But here's the kicker. I didn't even feel annoyed. I just kind of smiled to myself because, honestly, the whole thing was so absurd it looped back around to being charming. The man was in his own world, oblivious to the fact that the rest of us didn't sign up for this live-streamed episode of Heist Gone Wrong. And I thought, yeah, okay, this is where we are now. This is normal. I swear, the older I get, the more I notice these tiny, ridiculous things that define the world we live in. Like, we're all just winging it through this patchwork quilt of new rules and quirks, and nobody's questioning any of it. Take the way people shop now. Last week, I found myself in a rabbit hole reading reviews for biodegradable paper towels. Biodegradable. Paper towels. Because apparently, it's not enough for a product to wipe up coffee spills anymore. It also has to break down into soil that can nurture a tomato plant. One review said, these absorb really well, but they don't feel as luxurious as I'd hoped. Luxurious paper towels. Is this real life? Or here's another one for you. Online dating. If you've ever tried it, you know it's basically emotional gambling with strangers who claim to love spontaneous adventures and craft beer. My friend Amber talked me into downloading one of those apps a couple months ago, and the first guy who messaged me opened with, "What's your go-to karaoke song?" Not "Hi" or "How's it going?" Just straight to the deep stuff. So I answered honestly, "Wagon Wheel," obviously. And his response? "Never heard of it. Is that country?" I unmatched immediately. It's not just dating, though. Even regular conversations have gotten weird. Last month, I was at a coffee shop waiting for my oat milk latte. Yeah, I'm one of those people, don't judge, and I overheard this group of teenagers talking. Except they weren't really talking. They were just quoting TikToks at each other. Full sentences, word for word, like a bunch of tiny improv actors rehearsing for a play. At first I thought, oh no, kids these days don't know how to talk anymore. But then I realized I do the same thing with my coworkers. Just last week, I responded to a serious question with, "It's giving stressed." So, who am I to judge? So here's how it starts. Me dragging a keg of hop and circumstance out the back of the pub because the delivery guys managed to jam it into the fridge sideways. It's a Tuesday, middle of the afternoon, one of those weird dead zones of the week where time feels like it's stretching just to mess with you. The sun's out, which is rare enough in March around here, so I'm thinking maybe this day might not be a total loss. Anyway, I get the keg out, roll it over to where it needs to go, and then realize I left my phone in the pub. As I'm walking back, I hear this laugh, like not a normal laugh. It's this full belly flopping into a pool kind of laugh. And it's coming from the alley that runs between my place and the bakery next door. Now, you'd think I'd just mind my business, but no. I've got the curiosity of a cat that's already burned through 8 lives. So, I peek down the alley, and there she is. A woman, maybe late 70s, wearing a purple coat, so bright it's practically singing, standing next to this old, rusted bike with a basket full of daffodils. She's talking to a cat. Yeah, a cat. Big, orange, and sitting there like it owns the place, which, let's be real, cats always think they do. She waves at me like we've known each other forever and says, "You wouldn't happen to have a wrench, would you?" So now I'm in this. I go back inside, grab a wrench from under the bar. Don't ask me why we keep one there. It's a long story involving a tap line explosion, and head back out. By the time I get to her, she's crouched down, explaining to the cat why it should never trust a squirrel with a nut loan. I hand her the wrench, and she grins like I've just given her the crown jewels. "My name's Marigold," she says, and before I can respond, she's flipped the bike upside down and started tightening bolts on the wheels like she's auditioning for a pit crew. The cat meows like it's seconding the motion. Now, here's where things get weird, or weirder, I guess. Marigold says, "You know, you're in for a curious day. Not a good day, not a bad day, a curious one." Then she looks up at me, and her eyes catch the sunlight, and I swear, for a second, they look like the color of the lake on one of those perfect summer afternoons. I laugh, mostly because I don't know what else to do. Well, I'd better be, I say, because I'm running low on interesting stories to tell the regulars. She chuckles, tightens the last bolt, and says, "Keep your eyes open then. Curiosity has a way of finding the curious." She gets on the bike, pats the cat on the head, and rides off down the alley like she's just been transported from some whimsical French indie film. I'm standing there holding the wrench like a guy who's accidentally wandered into a chapter of Alice in Wonderland. Here's the thing. After she left, everything got odd. First, I find a $20 bill stuck to the bottom of my boot. I've been walking around the parking lot earlier, and it definitely wasn't there before. Then an old friend I haven't seen in years walks into the pub out of nowhere. Turns out he's in town for a conference, saw the sign "For Ale You Need Is Love," and couldn't resist checking it out. We end up reminiscing for hours, swapping stories about the dumb stuff we did in high school, like the time we tried to build a raft out of duct tape and milk jugs. By now, it's evening, and I'm wiping down the bar when I notice the chalkboard I use for beer specials has been wiped clean. I didn't touch it, and I know for a fact none of my staff did because they're all terrified of me when it comes to messing with my signs. But there's something new written there in the kind of handwriting that looks like it belongs in an old bookshop. Sometimes the universe gives you a nudge. Take it. I'm not gonna lie, it freaked me out a little. But then the front door swings open, and this couple walks in, all rosy cheeks and windblown hair. They're looking for a place to celebrate because they just got engaged at the park across the street. Turns out they met in my pub 3 years ago, over a shared joke about the name of a stout I used to brew called Stout of the Closet. They didn't even realize this was the same place until they saw the menu. So now we're all celebrating. I'm pouring champagne into pint glasses, classy I know. They're laughing, and the whole pub feels alive in a way that makes you forget it's a Tuesday in March. At the end of the night, I'm locking up when I find a daffodil on the bar. Just one, bright and yellow and completely out of place, because we don't have flowers in the pub. No one brought any in. I pick it up, and I swear I can hear Marigold's laugh echoing faintly, like she's somewhere just around the corner, watching and waiting to see if I'll keep my eyes open. So yeah, that was my day. Maybe it was just a string of coincidences, or maybe there's something to be said for the idea that every now and then the universe likes to remind us it has a sense of humor, and maybe a little bit of magic too. Have you ever had a day where reality felt almost like a dream or a strange fairy tale? I'm just chilling at home on a Tuesday night, minding my own business, eating cereal out of a mug because apparently washing bowls is too much commitment. The evening has that quiet hum of procrastination. You know, when you should be working, but instead you're scrolling through your phone like it's the key to inner peace. And that's when I see it. This ad pops up for the Curious Emporium, one of those kitschy stores where you can buy things like moon-shaped candles and tarot decks that come with free existential crises. The ad says they're having a one-night pop-up in the Mission District, and the first 50 customers get a mystery artifact. My brain goes, oh no, we're not falling for this. But my inner chaos gremlin goes, what if it's fun and spooky? Chaos won, obviously. So I throw on my coat, the one with all the mismatched buttons because I never got around to fixing it, grab my sketchbook and head out. It's foggy and cold, the kind of night that feels like the city's holding its breath. When I get to the address, it's this tiny, hole-in-the-wall shop wedged between a laundromat and a place that exclusively sells vintage roller skates. Inside, it smells like cinnamon, old wood, and just a hint of something's not right. The shelves are crammed with all kinds of random stuff: snow globes, marbles, little glass bottles filled with who knows what. A bored-looking cashier hands me a small paper bag, labeled Mystery Artifact, and waves me off like this happens every day. I barely make it 2 steps outside before I rip the bag open, expecting, a rock, or maybe one of those creepy porcelain dolls missing an eye. But it's a key, a very normal-looking key. No gloving, no veio carvingas, no ominosuns. Just metal, a little tarnished, like it's been sitting in someone's junk drawer for a decade. I'm half convinced I've been scammed, but then I notice a tiny tag tied to it with string. It says, find the door. Obviously, my brain goes into overdrive. Find a door? What door? Is this some kind of hipster scavenger hunt? But before I can spiral too hard, I feel this faint tug like the key is pulling me. Not physically. It's more like that sensation when you're playing with a Ouija board and you can't tell if it's moving on its own or if your friend's just messing with you. Yes, I have Ouija board trauma. Don't ask. So I let the key guide me. I'm walking down side streets, dodging late-night cyclists and pigeons with no concept of personal space, and the pull gets stronger. It finally leads me to this alley I've never noticed before, even though I've lived in the city for 5 years. At the end of it, there's this door, tall, heavy-looking, painted a deep, almost black green. It's got a little brass keyhole that looks like it's been waiting specifically for this key. At this point, every horror movie I've ever seen is screaming at me to turn around. But I'm 26, I'm an artist, and I have zero self-preservation instincts, so of course, I stick the key in the lock and turn. The door swings open, and I step inside to a library, but not like a normal library. This one is endless, with winding staircases and floating shelves and books that are literally glowing. It's quiet, but not an empty quiet, more like the sound of a million whispers just out of reach. A woman with silver hair and a dress that looks like it's made of smoke appears out of nowhere and says, "Welcome, Keeper. Your collection awaits." I do what any reasonable person would do in this situation. I panic laugh. Sorry, what? Keeper? Collection? Are you sure you've got the right person? I'm just here because I followed a mysterious vibe. She smiles like I've said something funny. All who are chosen say the same. Your task is simple. Every book here represents a life. Each time you sketch someone, a story will appear. You'll decide where it belongs, in this library or elsewhere. Now, I have so many questions. Like, how did I get picked? And what does elsewhere even mean? But she just hands me a blank journal and disappears into thin air, which feels a bit rude, honestly. I spend what feels like hours exploring. The books are wild. Some are tiny, like matchboxes, while others are so big they need their own ladders. I accidentally open one, and it plays out like a movie in my head. A woman in 1842 inventing a machine that brews coffee and tells the weather. I close it quickly because it feels like eavesdropping. Eventually, I test this keeper thing by sketching the barista who works at my local coffee shop. The second I finish the drawing, a book pops into my hand with his name on the spine. It's his life, right down to the part where he once accidentally served oat milk to a guy with a nut allergy and had to call an ambulance. He was fine, but the guy left a very dramatic Yelp review. And now I'm back in my apartment, journal in hand, key in my pocket, and about 98% sure this is going to spiral into something way bigger than I'm ready for. But here's the thing, I've only sketched people I know so far. What happens if I draw someone I don't know? Or worse, someone who doesn't exist yet? Like, do I create them? Rewrite them? Is it ethically weird to draw my ex just to see how his story ends? Anyway, if you found a magic key that led to a library of lives, what's the first thing you'd do? Asking because I really need ideas before I accidentally turn this into a cosmic HR disaster. I had this moment last week. One of those tiny, quiet epiphanies you only get when you're doing something ridiculously mundane. I was in the kitchen making coffee, and my phone buzzed on the counter. It was my niece, asking if I could help her find vibes for a playlist. I stood there for a second, staring at those words like they were written in another language. Find vibes? What does that even mean? When I was her age, the only vibes we cared about were whether you had enough quarters for the jukebox or if Blockbuster had your favorite VHS in stock. Naturally, I texted her back. You mean like songs? She hit me with, no vibes. Like stuff that feels like walking home from a bonfire in the fall, but also a little sad. Right, got it. Easy as pie. I told her I'd think about it, and as I poured my coffee, I couldn't help but laugh. Somewhere along the way, we've gone from mixtapes that screamed I love you, but can't say it out loud to curating the emotional equivalent of a rainy Tuesday in Paris when your umbrella breaks, but you don't care. It's not bad though, you know? It's just different. My students are like this too. They don't just want to talk about what happened, they want to feel it. I once asked my US history class to imagine being alive in 1776, and instead of discussing the political climate or economic pressures, one kid raised his hand and said, but like, how did it feel to hear the Declaration of Independence for the first time? Were they hyped, or was it more of a this better work vibe? I love that question so much it's now part of my lesson plan. It's also why I started bringing props to class. Last month, I walked in with a quill and ink set, a knockoff tricorn hat, and a scroll I printed out to look like parchment. We're going full Hamilton today, I told them. They ate it up. One kid asked to borrow the hat for a selfie, which he captioned, when you just want freedom, but King G is a total buzzkill. And yet, for all the vibes and selfies and curated playlists, there's this beautiful continuity. People still gather to share stories. Sure, maybe now it's over group chats or in Discord servers instead of around a fire. But the heart of it? That's the same. Like last Christmas, my sister's family did their usual cookie swap. Only this time her teenagers filmed the whole thing for Instagram. They were laughing and dunking cookies in milk like always, but now there were ring lights and captions. The cookies were tagged with hashtags like hashtag holiday glow up and hashtag sugar rush goals. I couldn't decide if I wanted to roll my eyes or join in. So naturally, I ended up in the background of one video, holding a tray of burnt gingerbread men. The caption? When Aunt Liz forgot to turn on the timer, but still showed up to the function. My niece said the video got 14,000 likes. And while I joke about it, there's something sweet about the way we've reimagined connection. Think about it. We used to tell stories around the dinner table. Now we share them with a few hundred strangers who like and comment, OMG same. It's just a bigger table. That hit me a few months ago during parent-teacher night. A mom came up to me, looking a little nervous, and said, my daughter's been loving your class. She told me you mentioned a John Adams quote about leadership last week, and it really stuck with her. I was about to thank her when she added, she even tweeted it. I didn't know whether to feel flattered or mortified. My random John Adams trivia was now floating in cyberspace, nestled between memes and food pics. But isn't that kind of magical? That a thought scribbled by some guy in the 1700s can still make a teenager stop and think? Sure, it's dressed up in emojis now, but the core is the same. People trying to share ideas that matter to them. And then there's the way we celebrate milestones. My neighbor's kid graduated high school last year, and instead of a backyard party, they threw a parade. Cars drove by honking, tossing candy out the windows while the poor kid stood there awkwardly in her cap and gown, waving like a homecoming queen. My neighbor live-streamed the whole thing, and the comments rolled in faster than the cars. Congrats, girl. You're amazing. Can't wait to see you crush college. It was a little chaotic, but also kind of beautiful. A celebration that went beyond one backyard. spilling out into the world. I think what I'm saying is we're always finding new ways to connect. Sometimes it's weird or messy, like trying to understand what a vibe is, but there's something deeply human about all of it. We take the tools we have, whether it's a bonfire, a camera, or a playlist app, and we say, here, this is who I am. This is what I feel. Do you feel it too? So, what's your take? What's one thing about today's world that makes you stop and smile, even if it's a little strange? Share your vibes with me. I promise not to burn any cookies this time.